Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Crucible. I'm your host, Andrew Wilson. It's been a long time since we've hosted a debate on this channel. Remember, we cut our teeth doing that years ago. It's a lot of fun for me to do. I still do it by special request here and there if somebody asks and I have the time. I have this world's dumbest. Look at how stupid this coffee cup is. It's way too small. It's like one of those, you can only get one finger through it. It's just a stupid coffee cup. Anyway, tonight, head-to-head, we have Gnostic Informant up against Dyer. The rules for the debate are as follows. There's going to be 10-minute opening statements for each for the first hour, and then it's going to be followed by 10-minute rebuttals, followed by 10-minute closings, and then we're going to get into an hour of open debate, followed by super chats and callers. It's going to be a banger. You guys know you want to see it. It's going to be a banger. And for those of you who are new here, of which there are many, I just want to point out that we always had the coolest music for the debates. And so we'll give you one of the throwbacks this evening before we bring our debaters on. You hear that hard cut off? Nobody liked the hard cut off. Everybody was always upset that the guitar just like had that really hard cut. I don't know. People are always bitching about something. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Crucible this fine evening. Welcome to, well, perhaps the debate of the month. Dyer, welcome back. Nice to see you. Take a brief moment, introduce yourself to everybody. Tell them a little bit about yourself.
Thank you. Yeah, Dyer of jaysanalysis.com, also host of the 4th hour of the Alex Jones Show most Fridays, and been on the Crucible for several debates back in the past. Glad to be back. Glad to be sitting here with Gnostic Informant. And you can find me on Twitter, and you can find me on YouTube under my name.
All right, I appreciate that. Before we get over to you, Neil, I just want to let the atheists who are supporters of yours in the audience know, I just want to let you guys know, you may think that because I'm an Orthodox Christian, I'm going to treat you like shit. And you would be correct. But you can remedy that by sending in tons and tons of super chats in order to support Neil this evening. I will give him fair moderation. Go ahead, Neil. Tell everybody a little bit about yourself, where they can find you as well.
Yeah, my name's Neil, Gnostic Informant. I have a YouTube channel with about 230,000 subs. We get into topics like ancient history, ancient mythology, early Christianity, Gnosticism, especially different sects of Christianity, the heretics, Irenaeus and Hippolytus, that type of stuff. Justin Martyr, Marcion, Valentinus. If you're into that type of stuff, come to my channel. I'm also on X, but I just kind of shit talk there. So if you like shit talking, you can follow me there too.
That's funny because that's what I do on X.
Yeah,
it's my favorite thing is to shit post on X. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, without any more ado, I'm going to let Jay go ahead with his opening statement. Jay Dyer, you got 10 minutes on the clock. Go ahead when you're ready.
Yeah, I want to start by saying that the argument here is about the coherency and the worldview that makes the best sense of reality. And between us, we will be arguing two different paradigms that have radically different accounts of the nature of reality. For my argument, I will be arguing from a divine revelation position that I believe sets forth what I would say is an Orthodox Christian paradigm, namely that the basic fundamentals of a worldview, my worldview, anybody's worldview, would be metaphysics, epistemology, and ethics. And those fundamental categories would point us in the direction of a worldview that makes sense of and gives an account of those things. It just so happens that within the Christian paradigm, specifically the Orthodox Christian paradigm, all of those three elements of philosophy or of a worldview make sense with the God that created this world, that providentially guides this world, that gives this world a telos or a purpose, and has also structured this world with a kind of logos or a logi that is a foundational organizing principle. The Greek philosophers talked about the logos, and if you go back to those Greek philosophers, even all the way back to the pre-Socratics, they spoke about this logos as a universal organizing principle. Other philosophers like Plato or Aristotle talked about the logi or the logos being something that is an explanation or a definition. When we work through these ancient philosophers, we notice that they don't really give much of an explanation other than conflicting amongst themselves as to who or what this actually is. It's fine to say that it's a law, it's a principle, but that doesn't tell us very much. And also it conflicts. The Stoic idea conflicts with later Neoplatonic ideas as to what the logos actually is. The Hebrew wisdom tradition, and I can give many scholars if we need to here, was not primarily drawing from the Greek ideas. Certainly Philo and other Jewish scholars were influenced by Hellenism, and they used the terminology of the logos that was coming out of the Septuagint and other translations of the Old Testament text during the 2nd century. But the idea, according to a Hebrew scholar, or excuse me, a biblical scholar from the Orthodox, excuse me, from the Oxford Guide to the Bible, it notes that the Johannine logos is strongly parallel to the concept of wisdom in Hellenic Jewish thought. But wisdom was already associated with the attribute of God in Wisdom of Solomon 9, 1-2. In the Hebrew Bible, the word of God is both creative and active, Genesis 1 and Isaiah 55, 10-11. And in Greek, logos meant spoken word or pervading principle. Stoic philosophy saw this as the guiding meaning or layer that ordered the universe. However, this meaning is not a direct background for John's logos that was already drawn out of, as we're saying, the Hebrew wisdom tradition. In Genesis 1, we have God's word there present and as an active means by which the world comes to be. As we progress throughout the Torah, and we're going to probably get to that later, I'm going to stick to the Torah, although there's many examples in the Psalms and the minor prophets and the historical books. There's many examples of this voice, this angel, this form, this theophany, having a personality, being distinct from Yahweh, but also being Yahweh, also being divine, also having the same characteristics to redeem, to save, etc. The reason this is important is that, as I understand, he tends to argue, my opponent, that the idea of the Trinity, these ideas are cribbed from Greek philosophers. They don't exist in the first 3 centuries of Christianity, I've heard him claim. Well, I'm ready to counter all of those claims, and we'll get to those later. But there's about 20 pre-Nicene references that I have, amongst dozens more, ready to go to prove that no, in fact, the early church fathers, the first, second, and third century, were consistent, not just with the New Testament passages about the deity of Christ and the Trinity. For example, in the Gospel of John, every chapter refers to either the deity of Christ or to the triad. And some passages have both in that chapter. And that's in continuity with the Old Testament, where you have all of these Old Testament passages, again, not just in the Torah, but we're going to focus on the Torah when we get to that in some of the rebuttals. The point there is that the Bible teaches this God, this theology, Old and New Testament. It's not cribbed from the Greeks, even though there's similar terminology. The terminology of logos is really dependent upon the system and the person using it. So, for example, logos used by Marcus Aurelius, as it comes up in his Meditations, is all over the place in what it means. It's a universal guiding principle. It's something innate within him. It's all reality. It's a pantheistic conception. It's the embodiment of the Roman Empire itself. So it's so elastic as to be almost everything and nothing. And that's really nothing in common with what John is doing in John 1 when he argues that the logos is actually the parallel to the voice of Genesis 1. John 1 is a parallel to Genesis 1. Genesis 1 is a creation of the world and created light. John 1 is a parallel that plays on that with uncreated light and the person of the Logos identified as the second person of the Godhead. But I want to go back to philosophy for a second, because what's really at root between he and I will be conflicting and competing worldviews. What I laid out is the revelational position of my theology in general and some of the sources and texts. I understand that he doesn't believe these texts, and many of the audience don't believe the text. And when we have competing ideas about the text, that means we have to go to other areas where we find common authority or common ground, and that would be the realm of debate. Debate functions around principles like logic, the laws of logic, the three basic laws: excluded middle, non-contradiction, law of identity. Those basic laws lay out how we would argue and then suss out contradictions between worldviews. If his worldview is unable to give a fundamental account of those three basic areas of philosophy, epistemology, metaphysics, and ethics, then it's going to be undercutting his ability even to debate. So that he showed up shows that he has to recognize the laws of thought, critical thinking, or to not engage in fallacious reasoning. And we're going to be having to pay a lot of attention to make sure that he doesn't engage in and rely on a lot of fallacious argumentation. Now, how do I get from what I'm arguing to my Christian conception? Well, as I said, if the world was created by God and it's the God that I'm arguing for, then it would make sense why there's regularity in nature, because God is providential. He providentially guides history. History has meaning. History is not something to flee from, as if we were a Gnostic or perhaps even a Neoplatonist, to try to return to the one or whatever his view might be. It's not something to go away from. It's actually a good thing. So history, reality itself is fundamentally declared to be good. And it's good because it has this logos organizing and structuring principle within it. It's not identical to the world. And we're going to see, I think, many fallacies and kill shots with his position of priority monism. And that's compared to a position where we don't have priority monism or any of these weird ideas about metaphysics with no justification. We have justification for the idea of an external world, for the idea of regularity in nature, for the idea of objective ethics, because we're made in the image of a good God, a holy God, who has a requirement, a law of the Ten Commandments, of how we ought to live.
2 minutes, Jay.
In the position of Neoplatonism or in the position of priority monism, we're going to notice that there's no real basis for good and evil. In fact, we might argue, or we might ask, does evil have ontological existence in a situation where all things are essentially parts of the one? We might ask, why would we prioritize one over many? And we're going to see, I think, that when he answers those types of questions, it relies on unjustified assumptions. That's why epistemology has to come into play. We have to figure out what are the justifications for the assertions that we have, and do we have good reasons for our beliefs? Not just any old reasons, but good reasons. So I'm going to argue that the Logos, this personal God that we have a relationship with, who's not just a unknown Unitarian, far-off Platonic idea or monad, but is a personal God who has a relationship with us that gives us ethics, that gives us life and meaning, and gives us an end goal, a purpose. The universe has intentionality. Even within the Neoplatonic conception or the monist conception, It's hard to figure out exactly why an immaterial one or an immaterial universal impersonal force or principle would in any way give us purpose or telos in a grand scheme. In fact, all of reality is sort of an eternal generation if you follow the Neoplatonist argumentation. Maybe he doesn't, we'll have to see. But regardless, there's going to be many fundamental problems that aren't fundamental problems in a Christian paradigm. His paradigm will be totally different and undercut the possibility, not just of his metaphysical speculations, but reality itself and knowing reality itself. Again, having a justified true belief about reality that you can make sense of without relying upon, this is what I feel, bro. This is the easiest answer. It's parsimonious. All of those things are unjustified reasons and assumptions as to why his worldview should be true, when really what's at stake here is which worldview can give an account for the preconditions and the possibilities of knowledge, ethics, and metaphysics.
All right, and that's time. Right on time, in fact. Just want to point out over 5,000 on YouTube, 7,000 between all platforms. Appreciate all of you guys coming in this evening to watch this debate. Gnostic Informant, you have 10 minutes on the clock. Go ahead when you're ready.
So I guess I heard some arguments there of why his worldview is coherent and accounts for these things. Like he said, the logos is personal. There's a few things in there, but mostly what I heard was my opponent needs to do this, needs to do this, needs to do this, needs to do this, worrying about what I'm going to say, when that should be for the next round. You should be giving an argument for your worldview, which I'll be doing right now. My worldview, which I call Apolloist monism, it's metaphysically priority monism. And I'll explain why I call it Apolloist monism in a second. It is basically priority monism as described by the Neoplatonist philosophers. So it's starting off with it's called a hierarchical hypostasis. The one, the good is the arche, the beginning. It's all perfect, all knowing, all powerful. And the one emanates from this, the nous, which is represented in different ways by different philosophers. I use Apollo because Apollo is form, intellect, logos, reason, perfection, the sun. We can use the sun as an example of the brightest light that we can see in our present world right now. It also gives off the most radiation, heat, and life sustaining. Doesn't mean I believe the sun is the monad. It's a representation. It's a model that we can use to sort of explain the metaphysics. And then also there's a triad at play, because the next emanation, which is the first emanation, which is the nous, is the brightest emanation. It's almost identical to the one itself. It's the closest thing you're going to get from perfection. The third emanation is psyche, or soul. And this is the mediator between all the numbers that come after, all the plurality that comes after. The mediator between the physical and sensible, emotions and feelings. I use Dionysus as a way to describe the whirling of the cosmos. And from this triad, emanations go all the way down to the physical world of matter. And the farther away you get from the one, the less good there is. Evil persists in this realm. Humans are at the top of the lowest realm, but our main objective is to climb the ladder to get back to the good. So I'm just giving basic. That's just a basic understanding of. You can ask me whatever you want if you want to go deeper into it, but it accounts for all things because it accounts for the laws of logic. It accounts for particulars. It accounts for universals. All the things that you asked for. Now, it accounts for the one and many too, because the emanations allow for the plurality to be distinct, but also have the essence of the one. So even down to the lowest form of life, there's a little bit of essence of the one within it. It doesn't mean that you and I are the same, that I'm literally your ear or I'm literally your finger. We are distinct, but we all come from the emanations of the one. That's what solves the one and the many. It's a metaphysical argument, just like you would say the Trinity is what accounts for that. Now, I think your worldview is incoherent. My worldview isn't, because my worldview doesn't have contradictions. My worldview allows for things like empiricism. And modern Platonists today actually accept evolution, and we accept the age of the earth because of empiricism. You can even go back and read Aristotle, who is not an evolutionist, but you can see he got close because of his empiricist mindset, because of his discovery of the laws of logic. He got very close. And I actually have a passage from Aristotle that I had got ready from Lowe, where he says, nature, this is from History of Animals. He says, nature proceeds from the inanimate to the, oh, I got to sign back in. It signed me out. Damn.
That's an F minus, Neil.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's
F minus, Neil.
I got signed out of Loeb.
Neil. You gotta keep it
out.
flowing.
I got clocked out of Loeb. That sucks. I can't find it now. Well, okay, whatever. I don't have to say it. You guys can look it up on Animals. He says, basically, I'll just describe what he says. I'll just paraphrase it. He says that when you look at animals, you can almost see types going into other types. There's almost like a blend of different types of animals. Like there's different types of horses and different types of fish, and there's like a gradient line. And he gets close to almost understanding that there's an evolution going on, but he doesn't get that far. And a lot of modern Platonists think that if he would have been around today and saw the evidence of, like, when we find fossils, he would have said, oh shit, there's transitional fossils. Things like atoms, by the way, I thought this was the defeater for Platonism, and it's actually not. Werner Heisenberg, who is the one who discovered the law of uncertainty, he actually argues that when you smash atoms together, under the atomist Epicurean view, Democritus view, they should get smaller and break apart. But what happens when you smash atoms together is they actually form mathematical symmetries, which is forms. So it actually favors the Platonist view more. So those type of things is why I started to become convinced by this worldview. So I'm just kind of laying this out for a little bit. But another thing I want to stress is the concept that Plato talks about is apory. So Plato in his dialogues, if you read Plato's dialogues, you know they never end on a solution. Socrates is always the best debater, but he never really wins the debate. It's always left off on, like, they don't really know like, we get close to it, but things have to stay open. We need to have that scientific mind that we could be wrong. That's just me completely coming to you honestly. I don't have to know all things. I am a not omniscient being. However, with using empiricism, laws of logic, not going against the law of non-contradiction, the law of identity, the scientific method, I can know things. And we can see that Aristotle discovered the laws of logic thousands of years ago, and they still stand up today. So we can know things almost to a certainty, but the only dogma that a Platonist should hold is virtue. If you are doing things that are breeding virtue, they are good, and you should do them. If you are doing things that are not bringing virtue, you shouldn't do them. That's the main dogma that a Platonist holds, rather than having faith. So it is a gnosis versus faith paradigm. We are disagreeing on that, but I would argue that how do we know God? So you might ask that question: how do I know God? Well, through negation. What God not is. God doesn't contradict himself. For example, God doesn't tell you through his scripture. For example, I have Numbers here. He doesn't tell you that he wants to abort babies, and then thousands of years later, one of the main dogmas of the church is like no abortions. So in the book of Numbers, you have Yahweh telling the high priest that if you suspect there's any, this is Numbers 5:11-31. If you suspect that a woman is being an adulterer, that you should make this potion, this water from the dust of the tabernacle, and give it to her, and then put a curse on her so that the baby in the abdomen will swell and the womb miscarries. Then the woman is to say, amen, so be it. So that's a contradiction in your worldview. You have your own God telling your priest to do abortions, but you say you're anti-abortion. Here's some more. Premise 1, a perfect self-sustained being lacks nothing and does not require appeasement. The biblical God commands sacrifices to atone for sins. Requiring sacrifice implies a need for appeasement or satisfaction. Conclusion. Therefore, Yahweh is not a perfect, all-sustained being. Not only that, he requires human sacrifice. In the book of Judges, Jephthah tells the Lord, he says, if you let me win this battle, the next person you put in front of me, I will put on an altar and sacrifice him to you. And what does God put in front of Jephthah after he wins the battle? His prepubescent daughter, who's a virgin. And they go on with the sacrifice and do it. It's not like the Abraham story where Abraham's tested and at the last second the angel stops him. Jephthah actually sacrifices a human to Yahweh. This is seen as good. Yom Kippur, Leviticus 16 says that you can sacrifice goats and bulls for sins every year at the time of Yom Kippur. So what happened? Did God change his mind and say, wait a minute, we don't no more Yom Kippur. We need a human. Actually, I'll send myself, a person of myself who's literally God. I'll put him in human form to sacrifice him to myself so I can save all you guys from me. It doesn't make any sense. It's not logically coherent. So a perfect being cannot experience emotional states that imply
You got to wrap it there, Neil.
security, last one, or relative change. Premise 2, the Bible attributes jealousy, repentance, and wrath to Yahweh. Therefore, Yahweh is inconsistent with divine perfection.
Okay. Now, gentlemen, I've always given people this option after they get past opening statements. If you want to keep the format, get into rebuttals and then get into closings before we open it up, we can do that. Or we can open it up right now, which will give you an extra 45 minutes of open debate. It's up to you guys. What do you want to do there?
Keep going. Back and forth.
Okay. Awesome. 10 minutes then, Jay, for your rebuttal. Go ahead when you're ready.
Just a second here, yeah. Okay, so we heard a whole lot of list of ideas, almost like he just sort of spat out all the things that just popped into his head with little to no actual refutation or argumentation about anything in the Christian paradigm other than perhaps going to Reddit and finding a few of the classic misunderstandings of anthropomorphic language. The argument that I gave, that he said I gave no argument, was that your worldview is incoherent at a fundamental level such that it makes the possibility of knowledge impossible. You might not like that argument. You might not understand that argument, but that's an argument. That's an internal critique. It's a transcendental argument. He said he's an Apolloist, monist. For him, there is a hierarchical one, a monad, and that there's an emanation from this nous. The nous then produces psyche. There's these gradations. So there's an ontological diminishment in this worldview. He laid out this wild Neoplatonic story. There's this triad. The things at the bottom are less good from the things at the top, which are the highest good. And it's also more perfect. Now, obviously, this is a wild bunch of metaphysics that he claims to want to be in line with modern science and scientific data and information and so forth. And maybe there is some reconciliation there. But if you want to appeal to modernity, 99.9% of modern academics, scientists, and all the people that he wants to perhaps appease or be in good cahoots with would laugh at this worldview and would not believe anything remotely close to Neoplatonism. Neoplatonism died out in the Middle Ages, in fact, and never really made a resurgence. Now, it has nothing to do with whether it's true or false, but it's just funny to me that there's this desire to want to be rational and academic and scientific when Neoplatonism is anything but. It's one of the most speculative metaphysical disciplines in the history of Western philosophy. Now, he says that the perfection is up at the top with the one, and then there's gradations down to the triad and then everything else that comes from the triad. How do we know this? On what basis are we supposed to believe from his worldview, from his paradigm, that there are good reasons to believe in this impersonal monadic generation that's going on? Why would the one, if it's perfect, split into many, which is less perfect? His own argumentation about perfection in Yahweh would apply to his own monad, that the monad wasn't able, it wasn't able to keep it from being many, which then leads to gradations. Think about how silly it is to say that Yahweh doesn't make sense because he did this and this and this in the Old Testament, and that doesn't make sense to me. But then you turn around and say that an impersonal force or one that's aperon, beyond knowability and existence and any predication at all, just split into two. And then that just split into three. It's just arbitrary assertions from the domain of metaphysics that anyone with an empiricist worldview would laugh at. Neil doesn't know the difference between empirical sense data and empiricism as a school. So that was a huge blunder when he made the conflation between these two things. The gradations of perfections would be laughed at by any modern philosopher, for one, because after the Middle Ages, philosophies and metaphysics of perfection get questioned. They're not believed because there's a Copernican shift in philosophy after human Kant. Why? What does that mean? It means that instead of having metaphysical assumptions and assertions that you make, the question then became, well, how do we know that those assertions and metaphysical things are actually the case? For example, Hume begins to raise questions about the regulator of nature. He raises questions about knowing the external world. Wouldn't you need to know those things before you tell me about ultimate reality and metaphysical gradations and levels beyond reality? Now, in the Christian paradigm, of course, we believe that there are these other realities, but that's because we have a divine being that's outside of time and space that gives us access to that reality. I realize that you don't believe that, but I'm saying we're in a much better position to say how we would think that that's the case, given the fact that we believe in divine revelation. If God exists, he could give revelation about himself and these higher realities or whatever to created beings. But in Neil's paradigm, the one is an impersonal monad. It doesn't do anything with intentionality. So notice there's no purpose actually to our lower bodily reality, even when he says our goal is to get back to the one. How do we know that? Why? The one is an impersonal aperon, a beyond being, a being beyond being, and beyond that being. That's what the aperon, or the negated existence of the one, actually is. So Neil has a position which is purely fideistic and based on faith. He thought that he would come with rationality and reasoning, but his position is completely irrational. In fact, he doesn't even know the difference between empiricism as a school and empirical sense data. Christians do not reject empirical sense data. In fact, we believe that God created us as beings with minds and with senses to learn things about the natural world. We just simply don't accept the empiricist school, which says that all knowledge comes from sense data. So again, fundamental conflations. Thus, he made another basic mistake by saying that Aristotle was an empiricist. Certainly, Aristotle was more empirical in his methodology than Plato, but he was not an empiricist as we think of the post-Enlightenment philosophers like David Hume or anybody from the positivist schools of philosophy. So he says that we can know these things, and we can know, for example, that there's only one dogma of a Platonist, and that is virtue. How do we know that that's the one dogma? He began his whole argumentation from the most outlandish speculations about the monad and the nous and the psyche. But then he says, but really the only thing we can know from Platonism is the virtue is to be virtue, to be virtuous. How do we know what virtue is if everything is a manifestation of the one? I understand that as a priority monist, he recognizes the reality of particulars and distinctions. But the problem isn't about recognizing distinctions. The problem is, well, what's the difference between good and evil? If all reality is fundamentally one thing, monism, and a manifestation of the one, even if there's gradations, then what is moral evil? In other words, even if Yahweh were guilty of the things that Neil says, well, in Neil's paradigm, everything is just a manifestation of the one anyway. Jeff Cy McEffrey doing all the stuff on his island, that's just a manifestation of the one. It might be a lower manifestation, but it's not an objective evil that one must oppose, because there is no objective standard of good and evil in Neil's paradigm. That's, again, another kill shot, which, again, Christianity, even if you don't like it, at least it makes sense and has a coherent basis to why there would be good and evil. There's a good God. Evil is a negation, a privation, and a moral infraction against that God's commands. So the bad parts of the Bible don't even have any sensibility in his worldview, given that there is no bad. For him, the bad is just non-being. That's the classical chain of being model that we're talking about. But that's not really bad in a moral sense. It just lacks being. Now, for the church fathers, we agree in some places that there is a sense in which evil is a negation. We don't think it has ontological existence, but we have a basis for moral evils because of a moral character that God has and tells us not to do these and that, these certain things. And thus we are also imprinted, being made in his image, with a moral sense of good and evil. That is, the law of God is written on our hearts in the Christian paradigm. Now, the passages that he talked about, none of those teach the necessity of human sacrifice. If you read James Jordan's book, James Jordan's famous commentary on the book of Judges, very prominent biblical commentator, he makes a very good argument that when God tells Jephthah to give up his daughter, this is in the tradition of the Jews, just like with Samuel, of committing your firstborn child to go serve at the temple. And this is a known Jewish practice, just like why we believe that Mary was committed to, as a young person, serve at the temple. You had that ability in Judaism to give up your firstborn, or your daughter even as well, to go serve at the temple. And the reason that mattered for the kings at that time was that meant they might not have a male heir through that daughter. So it's not just human sacrifice, because remember, already we've been told in the law of Moses to not have human sacrifice. The point of the story with Abraham is that God will provide the sacrifice, not that he accepts human sacrifice. In fact, Neil misunderstood the anthropomorphic language throughout the Old Testament, and Jews, Christians, Muslims, almost everybody understands that there's anthropomorphic language that's used to give us an idea of what God is like. Doesn't mean that God literally has jealousy, right? He doesn't learn new facts because he's omniscient, but we have words that are used to help us understand this deity. And we actually believe in the theology of negation as well. We think that God's essence is unknowable. We negate what God's essence is, but God's positive cataphatic attributes are the energies that come down to us, as St. Basil says. So we believe in a both and again, for him, you got
to wrap it very quickly, Jay.
The world as it exists has no actual purpose and no actual basis to understand moral good and evil.
Thank you for that rebuttal. Appreciate it very much. Neil, your rebuttal. You have 10 minutes on the clock.
It's funny how you just admitted that you also have the same doctrine of negation to know God, when for the last 10 minutes before that, you're sitting there asking me, how can I know things like God, when it's all, how did he just had this nonsensical way of just speculating, basically. And it's not speculation. It's a metaphysical argument, just like you're putting out there. The only difference is my metaphysical argument doesn't have contradictions like in the Trinity. For example, the law of non-contradiction. The law of non-contradiction states that something cannot be both one and many in the same respect at the same time. The Trinity claims that God is one and three. One and three are numerically contradictory if predicated on the same thing in the same respect. Therefore, the Trinity violates the law of non-contradiction. Also, the law of identity. If A equals C and B equals C, then A equals B. Transivity and identity. The Father equals God, premise 2. Premise 3, the Son equals God. Conclusion, therefore, the Father is the Son. That doesn't make any sense. That's a fallacy. I know you have your answers for that. And I love to get into that, have a back and forth about the Trinity. But you also mentioned in your first go around the wisdom of Solomon, and it's funny because even Orthodox scholars admit that the wisdom of Solomon dates to like 100 to 50 BC. It's a Hellenistic text drawn heavily from Platonist and Pythagorean metaphysics. It's written in Greek, first of all. It's not even written in Hebrew. So I don't know why you think that's some old text that goes back to Solomon. It doesn't. So you need to show me how you even got there, when even your own scholars will say that it's definitely Hellenistic. You don't even have your church doesn't even have a position on things like the age of the earth, because it can't have a position. It can't say we agree with the empirical data, because then your Bible is in contradiction with the empirical data. You can do the math yourself and go do the genealogies and figure out that you can go from Jesus back down to Adam using any of the genealogies, and you'll end up in a world that's about 6,000 to 7,000 years old. That is nonsense. And we can do this through predictive. We could test this out, and through empirical data, predictive success every time. When we dig rock layers, we always find the extinct fossils on the bottom of the layers. The farther down you go, You never find Homo sapiens at the bottom. You never find dinosaurs at the top. It's always the same layers for the same time periods every single time, 99.9% every single time. We know how old the Earth is. You can't have a global flood that wipes everything out if you don't even have enough water to cover the Earth. And not only that, how did the animals swim across the Atlantic Ocean around after 2000 BC, 2700 BC, whenever Noah was? So you have problems that you have to deal with that I don't have those problems. You also talked about John 1, the triad, or you said that I don't believe that the Trinity exists or the triad didn't exist after the 3rd or 4th century. I never said that. I don't know why I even brought that up. I actually argue the triad is in John 1. I actually agree with you. John 1 is a retelling of Genesis. Logos represents Adam, the new Adam, and in him, and aute zoe, which is the life, there's a triad there. Logos, God, Zoe, triad. However, it's not the later triad. It's not the Trinitarian Nicene Creed triad is what I argue. So NRK and hologos, kai hologos and pros ton theon. And then it says kai theos and hologos. That phrase kai theos and hologos is the predicate nominative in Greek. It's a well-attested grammatically phenomenon that it's all over the place. And if you switch theos with logos, it makes it an adjective. So actually, theos is not equal to logos in this verse. I know your church would disagree, but I'm just going off what the basic Greek tells me, that the logos is divine. It's a divine being, but it's separate from the logos, and that's why it says logos was with God, not was God, and the logos was divine. That word theos in the predicate nominative means it's being used as an adjective. Just basic Greek. No, it's not basic Greek. It's pretty advanced actually, but that's what the best Greek scholars would agree with me. Logos, you say like it doesn't have meaning, that it bounces around from person to person, but that's because the word logos has multifaceted, multi-purposes. The word logos can mean reason, it can mean logic, it can mean word, it could mean letters, it could mean a lot of different things. So people use the word logos in different ways, but ultimately the logos that we're talking about is the function of the creative reason in the cosmos. It's the nous. It's the brightest emanation from the one. And I would argue that Christian theology is borrowing from our worldview with the logos to construct John's logos with the logos. And so also you said Neoplatonism died in the Middle Ages. Well, Werner Heisenberg was a Platonist. Iris Murdoch was a Platonist. Thomas Taylor was a Platonist. That's modern. That's all the way to the 20th century, 21st century, almost 21st century. There's Platonists today. Actually, I just met someone. I was in Athens, Platonic Academy. So I don't know how you just thought that. Gemistus Plethon was debating Orthodox Palamites in Constantinople in the 1450s. He was a Platonist. What do you mean they died out in the Middle Ages? That's just wrong. But actually, I would argue that there's a straight line from today to Plato. And the reason you might say, well, where do they all go? How come they all just first of all, they got kicked out by Justinian. But second of all, we don't want massive people. We want elites. We want people who can think with reason. It's true. We're not trying to go out and convert people to Platonism. That's what you do, because that's what it is. It's a corporation. It's a religion. And so, what else was I going to say? Okay, so how much time I got left?
Right now, it looks like you still have almost 2 minutes.
Okay. So
I'm sorry,
you said,
over 2 minutes.
Okay, you said I don't account for things like the one and the many, because the one is just everything's just descending from the one. But I already explained the emanations solve this, and it's a metaphysical argument that I'm making. The solution to the one and the many preserves real unity and plurality without collapsing. In my monism, the many emanates from the one without being separate from it. So emanation preserves ontological unity while allowing real structured plurality. Therefore, the monism that I'm arguing preserves both unity and plurality. Now, the Trinity, you're just saying it does because you have three heads in one God, but that's still one thing. You're still talking about one thing which has properties. So how can one thing that has properties and needs sacrifices and gives scripture that has contradictions. Like, when was Jesus born? I don't know. Luke says 7 AD. Matthew says 4 BC when Herod died. Luke's census happened in 7 AD when Quirinius was governor. So what? This is what we're dealing with. All just contradictions and contradictions. But the Trinity does not even account for this. It's one being. One can't equal three. I'd like to hear you argue how one can be three at the same time, when my emanations actually solves this.
All right. We've got about pretty close to 8,000 live viewers this fine evening. Appreciate that from everybody. We're going to move into the debaters' closings and the hour one section, and then we're going to move into open debate. Jay Dyer, you have 10 minutes on the clock for your closing. Go ahead when you're ready.
Right. So again, I think this is kind of funny because half of what I said, he didn't even understand. First of all, negation in my view and using negation doesn't mean that I have the same view of you, right? Or as you. So the fact, yeah, you did. You said that, well, I have negation too. Yeah, but you don't have the idea of positive energetic presence in this world of the one. You have the emanations that are not the one, but they supposedly reflect or are in some way perhaps participatory in the one. How do we know that? And why should we think that? If the one is perfect, then why would we think that something that is not the one and is imperfect somehow reflects or participates in the one? I don't think you even thought about the very classic refutations of Platonism and Neoplatonism that have been around for centuries and millennia. People have been critiquing these positions. What I said was that 99% of today's academics and scientists laugh at Neoplatonism. I cited Werner Heisenberg about Neoplatonic ideas in my book 10 years ago. I'm well aware of what he said about fundamental reality bearing and showing geometric structure. And I think that's interesting. And I cite Paul Davies' book, Mind of God, all the time, where you have people like Roger Penrose, who's a modern mathematician. Those are mathematicians and physicists who speculate and believe in something that makes sense with a Christian paradigm, that fundamental reality is ordered and structured. But this reality is way less perfect than the higher reality that you talk about. In fact, again, why ought we think that there's any similarity between the perfect monadic unity reality and the imperfect multiplicity becoming flux reality that we live in? It's almost like you're not even aware of the basic critique of Platonism. How does the realm of the forms and the perfect idea up there relate to the imperfect, tainted, destructive chaos realm down here? Because they have oppositional characteristics. Now, you can say and assert that they have a similarity and they share in each other, but you don't have an argument for that other than to keep asserting that it is so. You seem to think that laying out the position of Neoplatonism is an argument. You said, well, it reconciles the one and the many. It does not reconcile the one and the many because, as I just pointed out to you, the one does not have the characteristics of the many because it's perfection at a higher level. If many is imperfect, then it's not like the one. And if you're going to say, well, but it's also kind of like the one, how do we know? That's the thing in question. These are classic critiques of Platonism. You say that 3 and 1 cannot, there's not a thing that can be 3 and 1 at the same time. Really? You ever seen this? This is a basic number. Is this 1 or is it 3? Oh, it's both at the same time. Is it more a single number or more 3? It's both. So even objects in this world, as we've argued countless times against the Muslims, can be both one and many at the same time. Furthermore, the way you even laid it out, something cannot be one and many at the same time and in the same way. Well, guess what? The Trinity is not one and many at the same time and in the same way, because the persons are not the same thing as the essence. So it's not the same thing in the same way, even according to our doctrine. So again, I don't think you understand what these arguments actually are about. The logical problem of the Trinity is something that we've also dealt with many times when it comes to Muslims. And the whole argument trades on the word God only having one referent. But Neil seems to be really adept at word concept fallacies by thinking that a word always has a single same referent. In fact, when I brought up the many different uses of logos throughout the ancient Greek philosophers, my point, and you backed that up, was to say, yes, correct, they all say these different things. And then you said, but my position is the right one. How do we know that? What is the justification for choosing the Neoplatonic idea Or if we're even if we're going to be a Neoplatonist, for example, you have Iamblichus, who's a ritual magic Neoplatonist, and then you have Plotinus, who's a sit around and speculate and think your way back to the one Neoplatonist. Which one is the real Neoplatonism? Which one is the Neoplatonism? It's the one that you've made up. And that's the thing, is that there's no justification for Neil's Platonism, which is his own made up Neoplatonism. Now, counting by identity versus counting by division is what the early church fathers and even many in the ancient world used to distinguish different ways of counting different types of things. So the divine essence, for example, is counted by dividing. That's why the Nicene Creed says one and undivided. That's counting by division. And many ancient Greek philosophers also counted this way. Counting by identity is a different way of counting, and certain types of things that you can't think of as having any partitions, you count by identity. For example, logical sets or laws of logic, right? So for example, the law of non-contradiction, there's no half of a law of non-contradiction, right? So it's an abstract object that you have to count by identity. Thus, you can't count by division. And throughout the history of the world, people have counted different things in different ways. Even in the Middle Ages, they began to recognize in medieval grammar text and mathematical texts how to count different things in different ways. So they had this distinction by first order imposition and second order imposition, even in the Middle Ages when it came to counting. So that's nothing new. But what you're saying with the logical problem of the Trinity is, again, something that we've elucidated in all the Muslim debates when it comes up many, many times over, is just conflating two different ways of counting. And the funny thing about that is that in the case of Muslims, they also counted in various ways in the ancient world. They counted by division, for example, in Al-Ghazali. Many ancient Greek philosophers, who I'm sure you actually would like, also counted by division and counted other things in other ways by identity. So if you understand that, that really sort of dissolves the whole issue with counting and the logical problem of the Trinity, and also the fact that the word God doesn't have a single referent in divine revelation. God can refer to God himself in terms of divine persons. It can refer to the divine nature. It can refer to divine operations or attributes. It can refer to human, and it can refer to angels and demons throughout the text of Scripture. When I said the wisdom of Solomon, I didn't just mean the deuterocanonical text, which, again, apparently you're not aware of this, but there's a bunch of other texts called Proverbs that are dated to the time, loosely, you could say, even if you take the liberal dating of Solomon. So guess what? Proverbs 7, 8, 9, those talk about the wisdom text. So you didn't even know that Hebrew wisdom text is not summed up in the wisdom of Sirach. If you date that to the 2nd century BC, I'm talking about the totality of wisdom texts, whether it's Sirach, whether it's the wisdom of Solomon, or whether it's Proverbs. They consistently refer to wisdom as a personified character, as a personified person. For example, Proverbs 7 and 8, at the beginning of the creation, participating in the creation of the world. That's why John 1 is using that same terminology. Now, you claim that that basic Greek shows you that John 1 should be interpreted in your way. Do you actually know Greek?
Mm-hmm.
And then you said the best Greek scholars say this. Okay, I'd be interested to hear some of your Greek scholars and
Sure.
what Greek scholars are the best Greek scholars that say this, because you gave the impression first like you know the Greek. I'm skeptical. Maybe you do. Maybe you are a Greek scholar, but I'm skeptical that you are. Perhaps you are. Then you went on to say that the logos that you're talking about is the logos that is the nous and so forth and so on. That's the one that's the right one out of all these ancient texts. And there are many uses, the variations of the use of logos. That's the one. Okay. How do we know, Neil? What is the epistemic justification? You said there's all these arguments, but you said the one in the many. Okay. But the one in the many is a problem in your position, because why are there many at all? Why would we think that imperfect things reflect the perfection of the aperon, the beyond?
Okay. That's it.
Jay, are you yielding your time? You still got a couple minutes
got
left
more.
if you want to take.
How
Yeah, if
many?
you want to take it, you still have looks like almost 3 minutes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll keep going.
Go ahead.
So again, let's go back to what we wanted to stress when it was an issue with the original. This were things I didn't get to in the original rebuttal. So again, what I think Neil's not understanding is that modern science, modern academia, for the most part, I said 99.9%, are not Neoplatonists. It doesn't mean there aren't some outliers, but the majority of academia who are empiricists for the most part, meaning that we can't really go beyond sense data. You've got two different conflicting situations in your worldview, Neil. On the one hand, you want this mystical theology that's gradations of reality from the one. And then you've got this other desire to fit into modern academia and be scientific. Well, modern scientific empiricism or positivism or whatever you want to call it has nothing to do and would totally reject all of your first presentation. Now, maybe you've got some way you think you can reconcile it, but I'm just curious, like, how are you going to get from empirical sense data, because you said that's what you want to be, rooted in and grounded in and do science. How does science tell you about the monad that's beyond experience? How does science tell you about the nous and psyche underneath that? Where does science or the scientific method tell you that there's gradations of reality from the one and that the one is more perfect? So these are all assertions, metaphysical assertions. And I think you meant Plethon. You mispronounced it, but Plethon was an atheist Platonist in Byzantium. Yeah, one guy in the Middle Ages. So what? That's, again, against the point that the majority of people today are not that. And it actually proves my argument by you saying that there was this guy in Byzantium, Plethon. Yeah, one guy in Plethon. So it died out. Or one guy in Byzantium, so it died out. Now, if you read Sinisioglu's book on Plethon, which came out a couple of years ago, I've got it right over here, he argues that the tradition of atheistic Platonism went on into Spinoza and into the Jacobins and other philosophers of the Renaissance. So I want to know, again, Neil, we've got to understand, we got to hear some kind of reason as to why we ought to believe this mystical Neoplatonism. All I heard was, well, it does this, and here's problems in the Bible. Okay, fine. What is the good argument to know from empirical data and sense data, which you rely on, that all of these metaphysical things are true?
All right, we gotta leave it there. Tried not to interrupt the last portion there. Neil, you have 10 minutes on the clock for your closing statement before we open up the floor for an open debate. Go ahead when you're ready.
I didn't actually pronounce his name wrong. It's Plathon in Greek. It's Plethon and maybe some English anglicized version. You did the same thing to me when I talked to you a while ago when I said duad. You said dyad. Ha! Duad is a word that people use. It's a Greek word. We even anglicize it as duad in philosophy. So I'm surprised someone with a master's in philosophy didn't know that.
You speak Greek?
Yeah, I do. I don't speak Greek.
Hang on, Jay. You can't interrupt his closing. Go ahead, Neil.
I'm a student of Greek, so no more than you do. Anyways, so yeah. Well, now to go back to when you picked up a book with the number 3 on it and said, "Is this 1 and 3 at the same time?" It's one book with the number 3 on it. Doesn't mean anything. You didn't show me anything. You didn't demonstrate that something could be 1 and 3 at the same time. You just picked up a book with the number 3 on it, and that all that is to me is that's a book. That's one book with a number 3 on it. That was like mind blowing when I saw that. That was hilarious. But yeah, you want to know why? Why should I believe your worldview? Why should I care? Well, first of all, I never said that I'm trying to get modern science to be grounded in all these. I want everyone to be a Platonist and all believe in my stuff. These are metaphysical arguments. These are metaphysical arguments that account for things, just as you're doing. The difference is my worldview allows for things like empirical data and we have the predictive success on our side, where you are bogged down by dogmas that get you you have to believe the earth is 6,000 years old, or that evolution is false, and you just flat out just deny in your face physical evidence of transitional fossils, where I don't have to do that. So I don't care if 99.9% of empiricists are atheists. Great. I don't care if they're atheists. It means nothing to me. It doesn't bother me one bit. What we're doing in philosophy and Platonism is a totally different thing. We're doing metaphysical arguments and trying to account for the world and ethics and and stuff like that. But we can just negate your worldview off the rip just because of how flawed it is, and we can just go through and say, and I pointed some things out to you, the major contradictions in your biblical corpus. And I wasn't talking about anthropomorphic stuff. Like, yeah, okay, maybe you can get away with saying God being jealous is anthropomorphic, and he wasn't really jealous, but that's just how it's reflected in the story. But you still have an answer. Why does God need sacrifices? Why does God need to send himself to save the world from himself? That's not an omniscient God. That's not an all-powerful God that needs to do all these things. So a perfect and omniscient being doesn't regret prior actions. Yahweh regrets making the earth in Genesis 6. He says, I, Yahweh, regretted that I have made the earth. So Yahweh can't be a perfect omniscient being. So I'm already more coherent with you. This debate's over at that point. I'm already, even if you don't think that my metaphysical arguments can be proven with whatever. I mean, why should I believe in your monad? Well, I don't have to believe in yours because you're giving me things that I can just cancel out just because of the fallacies. An all perfect being does not need anything. Can't be jealous. Can't not know things. Can't lose battles. In the book of Judges, I have my notes here. Yahweh goes up against the Midianites, and it says that the spirit of Yahweh was with the Judahites, but the Judahites couldn't defeat the Midianites because they had iron chariots. The spirit of God was with the Judahites. This is what it says. How else do you exegete that? Do I have to be an Orthodox priest to exegete that? No. I can use my own reasoning and say that is not a perfect God. That is a God that is flawed. This is a God that dashes little children against rocks and is boasting about it in the Psalms. And let's talk about you brought up the dating of the text, and I was talking about Wisdom of Solomon in particular, which is clearly Hellenistic. It's written in Greek, first of all. Game over. We don't even have a Hebrew version. It's a Greek text. And you said, I'm talking about the whole corpus of Solomon. Well, let's talk about the whole corpus of Solomon then. None of it. There's no evidence for any of it going back before like 400 at the latest. And I can tell you how I know this. When Israel was conquered by the Assyrians in 586 BCE, a bunch of thousands of Jews fled down to Elephantine while all the rest of them went to Babylon in captivity. But they set up a colony called Elephantine, and they set up a temple of Yahweh there. And they called themselves Judaios in Greek, Yehudim in Hebrew. And they wrote Aramaic texts, and we have hundreds of them. So we have a perfect time capsule. From 586 to 400 is when they left and went back to Jerusalem. That's 186 years. So this is after the first temple period. Well, guess what you find there? You don't find anything about the Torah. There's not a single mention of Abraham, not a single mention of Moses, not a single mention of Jacob, not a single mention of the 12 tribes, not a single mention of Moses, no Noah, no Adam and Eve, nothing, no Torah, nothing. They get a letter in the year 410, I think it is, from Jerusalem. They get a letter sent to them. We had the letter. We found it. We dug it up. And it's telling them for the first time how to do a Passover. We were starting this new thing called Passover. This is in 410 BCE. This new thing called Passover, and we celebrated on Nisan 14. Well, it's every year is on Nisan 14. That's like me telling you to celebrate Christmas on December 25th. It's all you should already know that. So these are the Old Testament that you think goes back to Moses and Solomon. That's nonsense. Prove it. There's not a single piece of evidence for the Exodus anywhere. There's no mention of Moses in any Egyptian sources. Joseph in the Old Testament was the vizier of the entire Egyptian kingdom. The second highest, most powerful person in the entire Egyptian kingdom. Well, guess what we have from Egypt? Even to this day, we have all the records of all the pharaohs and their viziers. None of them mention any Joseph. We don't know. Joseph doesn't exist. He's made up. In fact, the name Yosef probably is some sort of derivative from Osiris. Some scholars point out some sort of euhemerization of Osiris, how he descends into the underworld, into the dungeon, and it rises up and becomes the second most high next to Amen. So there's a lot of things we could see what's going on in the Old Testament text, like the story of the flood with Noah, where he lets off a raven and a dove, and the raven and the dove come back 7 days later to tell him he's on land. Well, sure enough, we got Sumerian and Akkadian tablets that predate the Bible by 2,000 years, about the Epic of Gilgamesh, and there's another source I'm thinking of, the mind slipping right, the name of it slipping my mind right now, but it has this exact same story where what's his name? I can't remember his name. He's on the ark, and he's got all the animals, 2 of each animal, same story, and he lets off a dove and a raven that come back 7 days later, but it's not Noah. That sucks. It's not Jewish. This is Akkadian. This is just borrowing other stories and then personalizing it. And how do we know that? I just assert that they do this right here. You see those yellow and black texts that I'm pointing to? Those are called pseudepigrapha. You should read them. They're false writings.
Yeah, I have them right
here. They're false writings. They're fake text, writing in the names of other people. And this is like, this Christians pick up on this. Pseudo-Dionysius, 5th century AD. He's not a 1st century writer. He's a 5th century writer adopting Neoplatonism. So when I see these things, pseudo text, no evidence, I go, my reasoning tells me this is not the true religion. This is not the true worldview. So I have a more simple worldview that accounts for things. And that's why I go with Neoplatonism.
Gentlemen, we just got a major raid in, which I really appreciate. We're at almost 10,000 live between all platforms.
Nice.
Just about 8,000 live on YouTube at the moment. Appreciate very much for the raid. Yeah, I do pretty well. Yeah. Anyway, appreciate it very much. I don't know who rated me. Maybe a mod can let me know so that we can think.
Mind if I grab a water real quick?
Yeah, you can grab a water. I'm going to take a brief intermission for 2 minutes, guys, before we get to the open debate. If you want to grab anything else, you're welcome to. Bathroom break, whatever it is that you guys want to do. Appreciate the raid. Oh, was it Timcast? Thank you, Timcast. Appreciate it. Real quick call to action. Make sure you like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. And also send in your super chats. You don't want all that evil money in your wallet anyway. It's uncomfortable. You can send it in to me. Instead, I always think that that's a much better gig. All your super chats going to get read. Moving into the 3rd hour of the debate. We're moving into the 2nd now. We're also going to be taking on callers. So mods will be this hour putting in the link so that you can come into the Discord to get vetted so that you can call in the 3rd hour to ask your questions directly to the debaters. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to open the floor up for this debate between Jay and Gnostic Informant. Gentlemen, I expect you both to adhere to my moderation. If there's too much over talking, things like this, I'm going to break the debate up a little bit and get it back on track. That's my job as the mod. It's your guys' job to do the debating. With that, the floor is open.
Are we going to go like back and forth with any time or just
no time on this one? It's just open floor.
So I'll just start with Neil. I'm not talking about the book. I'm talking about the numeral 3. Mm-hmm. Is the numeral one thing or is it 3?
Well, it's one number, so it's the number 3.
So it's 1 and 3.
But it's the number 3, but it's one thing.
Yeah. So is that 3 things and one thing?
It's not 3 things. It's one thing.
The number 3 is not 3.
The number 3 can count. You can count 3 things using the number 3.
This is 3 and 1.
It's just the number 3 on a piece of paper. That means nothing.
Right. So it's 1 and 3.
No, it's not. It's one thing.
It's not 3.
It's one thing with the number 3 on it.
So
we use 3. We use 3 to count things. We don't just put 3 on something and it becomes 3.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. So all numbers are only one thing.
This has a bunch of numbers on it. Does that make it the numbers?
Well, again, whether you think it has ontological existence or not is different from the fact that the number 3 is not just 1. It's also 3.
But it's one thing that has the number 3 on it. That's literally
reality. Number 3 signify, Neil?
3.
Thank you.
But that doesn't make the number. That doesn't make that 3 things. That's just what the number signifies.
This is also a signifier, right?
Yeah, but if you gave me that,
1 and 3 are signifiers, right?
If you gave me that to signify 3, I would say 3 what?
It
3
doesn't
books?
matter.
Yes, it does matter.
No,
We're trying to be coherent here, right? Coherent is
no,
not the
if it's a signifier, then 1 is also a signifier.
So you're just saying 1 is 3. Great. Gets me nowhere.
No, I'm saying it's 3 and 1, Neil. Are you fundamentally unable to understand that?
No, I understand what you're trying to say. It doesn't make sense though.
Okay, then is the
1
number
can't be
1
3.
Either
1 is 1 or 3 is 3.
This is fundamentally stupid. Is the number 1 a signifier?
Yes.
Okay, how many is that?
That's 1.
Okay. How many is that one?
That's a 1 and a 2.
No, this.
2.
Okay, so is this one object itself, the symbol itself?
The symbol is 2.
Thank
Okay,
you.
But
Thank
that's
you.
not. But you can't say that this book is now 2 things now.
But one is also a symbol.
I know, but the book
So
is
it's
still
you
one
already
thing.
admitted it's a both and, Neil.
No, you asked me what the symbol means. That was you slipped that in there at the end.
Signifier. They're signifying
Nice try.
one.
It didn't work.
This is one object that's a signifier of 2 things.
Right, but you're still holding one thing in your hand.
I'm talking about the numbers, Neil. Not
I know
the
number means 2. I get that, but
Okay,
the
but
thing
is
in your
the-
hand is still one
Neil,
thing.
this is fundamentally stupid. The number
It is
itself,
fundamentally
the
stupid.
numeral,
You're
the
right.
symbol.
It is so fundamentally stupid.
Okay, so this. What is this?
That's the Roman numeral 2.
And what is this?
2.
Right. So
Okay.
they both refer to what?
Those numbers, those symbols mean 2.
Right.
2
Is
what?
this one thing as a whole?
The number
Is this
is
one
2.
thing?
The number
Is
means
this
2.
one thing on the page right here?
It is one thing on the page, yes,
Thank you. So it's
One
one
symbol.
in many. You just admitted it.
but it's still one thing.
Are you fundamentally stupid? You just
I'm
said
asking
it's
you.
also
You can say
in
one
many.
thing is. You can put a number 2 on
Neil,
my head and say I'm 2
One
things
and
now.
many is the point of this, that something can be singular and also many at the same time. For example, take an object like a
Incoherent.
book. Neil, is a book, does it have many parts?
Yes,
Okay, is it also one book?
it's one book.
Thank you. So it's one and many. So objects can be one and many at the
But
same
it's
time.
still one
Answering
book.
your question.
Yes, but that now you have a problem. Now
But
you have one entity with 3 parts. How do you make it 3 distinct things?
Neil,
when it's
you
still one
argued
entity?
that something can't be one and many at the same time.
I can have different parts. I didn't say that. I said one can have different parts. I didn't say one can be many at the same time. That's why
No,
the
you said
emanations is a
something-
better account for
You
the
said
emanations accounts better.
I'll say exactly what you said. Something cannot be one and many at the same time in the
It can
same way.
have many parts, is what I said.
No, you said, quote, something cannot be one and many at the same time in the same way.
Exactly.
I wrote down the quote.
I agree with that.
Okay.
I've never stopped
Is
saying
this
that.
book one thing and many things at the
It's
same
one
time?
thing with many parts.
Mhm.
That's
So
different.
it's one and many?
It's one thing with many parts. It's different.
So is it one and many at the same time?
It's one book with many parts. That's
so
how you
it's one
describe
and
it.
many.
It's one in many. Yeah, it's one in many parts.
Thank
That's-
you. That's so you
That was
refuted your original.
that was
you
cheap,
admitted
dude.
your
That
previous
was
thing is
cheap.
false.
Anyone
You just-
watching
you
this
just
with a
got over.
normal IQ understands what just
So
happened.
now you're going into ad hominem because
Oh,
you
you're
got
right.
owned
All
on
right.
something
Maybe I'll lay out
fundamental.
the ad homs then. Okay. Is there any more questions you got?
Sure.
I want to know what the Trinity. I want to know how the Trinity. You're saying the Trinity can be 1 and 3 at the same time. Fine, we can move past that. I think it's nonsense.
Yeah, but you already admitted the contradiction, so you can think it's nonsense, but you can't.
I never
explain
admitted
why.
the contradiction. I'm talking about
Well,
parts.
you just
versus, talking about parts versus
You
one.
just contradict yourself like 10 times.
Oh, you think I did?
You said the
you
parts
want
are
people
many.
to think I did.
Is
You
it
want
one
people
and
to
many?
think I did. It's one thing with many parts.
So it's one and many.
So it's one thing with many
And
parts.
many. Thank you. So again, you're repeating yourself over and over.
You're getting me. You want me to say that? Then sure. You want me to be incoherent? Because I'm not going to do it.
Do I want you to be incoherent?
Yeah. One is it one in
You're
many?
doing
No,
it-
it's not
you're
one in
doing it on
many.
your own,
It's
bro.
one thing with
Like
many
what?
parts. Am I many things at once?
Yeah, you
My
have many
knee-
parts.
Something else? Yeah, I have many parts. Exactly. I have a hand. I have an eyeball. But it's all Neil. I have different cells
So,
that don't
so
even
it's one and many. Thank you. You're just making
one
my
in
case.
many parts. Why can't you
The
agree
fact that you
that's
add
what it
parts
is?
doesn't matter, Neil, because it's
Yes,
one
it
and many.
does.
No, it doesn't.
Yes, it does. Parts
If
is
you
what
admit
means.
that it's many, it doesn't matter. Obviously, many would be parts. That's contained in the idea of many.
But that's all I'm agreeing to is that it's one thing still with
So it's
different
one
parts
and
within it.
many, regardless of part. Parts is contained in the idea of many.
Yeah, but many is the parts. It's not many different things. It's not different things
wait.
altogether.
The parts aren't different things?
The parts are different parts.
You said they're not different things.
The parts are different parts.
You said they're not different things.
Well, they're not. That's my hand is still Neil's hand. It's part of me.
Okay, but it's not a different thing from your
It's
arm?
not your hand. It's not
You
Andrew's
said
hand.
it's not different things.
Can
Neil.
it be Neil's? Can my hand be your
Is it a
hand?
different thing from your leg?
Yes.
So it is different things. Which again, you're contradicting every
It's a
few
different part.
sentences.
I keep saying it's a different part.
You said
Anyways.
they're not different things.
I said it's a different part.
You
said
said
it
they are not
20,000
different things.
times
You literally
already.
just said that.
I said one thing has many parts within it. Everything has many parts within
And
it.
then you said they're not different things.
Okay, let's do something more basic.
Well, are they different things or not?
Is this one thing or many things?
It's both.
Really? Where is it?
What do you mean?
What else? What is it? What's so different about it? What else is there?
What? I
It's
mean,
one
it
thing.
has a surface and it has a cap.
Oh,
or
okay.
a
So it has
wall.
different parts. Exactly.
Yeah, but Neil, you said different parts are not different things.
Well, if you want to describe parts as things, then I would have to ask you what you mean by things, and you would say it's parts, and I would say,
What?
okay, yes, this is just regular English right here.
Okay, no. All right. Do you want to ask the next question, or do you want me to?
Yeah, I mean, I threw at you a lot of biblical contradictions, and like like you seem to be very adamant that the world is only 6,000 years old because the Bible says so. I don't even blame you. You're trying to stay consistent in your worldview, but even your church doesn't have a stance on this, or like things like evolution.
Why does the church have to have a stance on the age of the earth?
I mean, these are fundamental things about our reality where you and I are debating on these things.
Hold on. How do you? So you know the age of the earth?
Yeah.
You said it's fundamental, right?
Yeah.
Well, if it's fundamental, it's a dogma. Is it a dogma, or is there only
not,
one
not a dogma? But I'm saying, like, if the Bible says the Earth is 6,000 years old, and we have empirical data that contradicts that, that's a problem for you. How do you? What do you just deny empirical data? Is that how this works?
No, I already said at the beginning that we don't deny empirical data.
So what do you do when people show? What do you do when paleontologists and archaeologists dig deep under the ground and they predict exactly what's going to be down there based on other digs for the last 100 years?
Do you understand that when you look at an object doesn't give you age? It's an interpretation of the object. Yeah,
but I just asked you a specific question on how paleontologists can dig to certain levels on the ground and predict to a T 99.9% of the time what's going to be down there based on the other digs around the world.
But there's also times when there's fossils between those layers, which contradicts that theory, right?
No. Show me an example.
There have been trees in Iceland, in Antarctica that extend between the ice layers.
Oh, you have to show me that. I've never heard of that.
Yeah, well, it's a famous case, but
like I said 99.9% of the time. I'm sure there's outliers, but that 99.9% of the time.
But wait a minute. Wouldn't one outlier mean that perhaps that?
No, it means there's something happened
so they're not reliable.
No, it's 99.9% not reliable.
No.
So you're gonna throw out 99.9% predictive success for the Bible.
I'm not a paleontologist, and
sure.
The fact that you understand that just because there's predictive success doesn't mean that your model's correct. You can have multiple models that have predictive success. This is called the underdetermination of data.
I agree with that. I actually agree with that.
Okay, so then what you're arguing doesn't tell us which paradigm is correct. So beyond that, like I can say that I have a different authority in terms of what I consider the ancient world to have existed and been like. You have another authority. And I don't reject, quote, science, but again, I'm making a different point about when you see the rock layers or when you see the strata, there's nothing about that immediately tells you a time frame or an age. So how do you know today?
Fair, but let me ask you this. When you find contradictory data, for example, when we go to places like Elephantine and they're doing the opposite, they're making graven images, they're polytheist. They are not.
Now you're going to something different.
I know. I'm saying for let's not talk about just looking at rocks. I'm talking about evidence that goes against the biblical narrative. For example, when we go in places that say that where there's Jews living after the first temple period, and we look at all their writings, and that has nothing to do with what the Bible said they were like. They're completely different.
Well,
they're doing the opposite. They're eating pork. They're doing stuff on Sabbath. They are worshiping multiple gods with Yahweh.
That's like saying the Essenes disproves Judaism because the Essenes did something totally different than the Jews.
What are the Essenes doing that goes against the biblical narrative? I'm not talking about.
Well, they had a
different sects.
Listen to me. They had a Jewish Gnostic perspective. They believed that they were the sons of light, and they had certain ascetic practices that the Torah doesn't teach. So my argument is,
but the Essenes have the Torah. The Essenes had the Torah. Okay, go ahead.
It doesn't matter. That's not the point. The point is that the fact that there's a sect somewhere that's doing things different in no way leads you to the conclusion that the Jews with the Torah or the Jews in Israel are doing that they don't exist or that they're not there. It's an argument from silence.
It's not an argument from silence. It's actually the evidence is the opposite of the historical claims from the Bible. There's evidence that
How
directly.
do you know that the Jews didn't exist prior to this sect? Wouldn't the
I
Jews
didn't
have
say
to
they didn't exist.
Okay.
I said
what are
there's
you
no
arguing?
evidence that they were Torah observant. There's no evidence that they even knew what the Torah was. In fact, the things that they're doing in their text and in the archaeology shows the exact opposite that they weren't
I got you. Okay. So, and this is what century you're saying?
Are you talking about Elephantine?
Mhm.
586 to 400 BC.
Okay.
6th century to 5th century.
And what main scholars have this opinion? Because I'm going to show you scholars who said the opposite of that. Where are you getting this?
Well, okay, I can go to Gad Barnea. I can go to Jonathan Adler, Russell Merkin, Thomas L. Thomas, Philip R. Davies. I could go to let's see. I could go to Bruce Loudon. I can keep going on and on and on about this.
Okay. So everybody note these scholars because we have no idea who.
Yeah, write those down, please. Everyone, write those down. Bruce Loudon, Thomas L. Thomas, Philip Davies, Russell Merkin.
Hang on. Let Jay respond
Jonathan
here.
Adler, just so people know.
Let him respond.
So now when we go to, for example, the again, just using this as an example text, which refutes also this claim and the other claim, or at least it shows contrary scholarly evidence. So again, Oxford opinion to the Bible. The book of Proverbs deals with the prophetic tradition, the writings, different from the prophetic tradition, the writings of this wisdom literature consists in parts of sayings, short pithy forms, etc. The Hebrew word is translated to mean comparisons, and then it goes on to say that many of these texts date to the 5th century BCE, but also many of them are actually even earlier to the pre-monarchic position. So you said earlier that there's no older evidence for this period for the book of Proverbs.
Yeah,
I mean, mainline non-conservative necessarily. This is just Oxford.
That's a linguistic claim, first of all.
And Ian Young. Hold on. Do you have
there's
a
no
linguistic
evidence
degree?
I would ask that scholar.
Are you a textual scholar? Hold on. Are you a textual scholar first?
I'm not a textual scholar. When did I say I was?
How do you know about linguistic claims?
Because I talk to textual scholars.
Okay. But that doesn't make you a textual scholar.
No, I didn't say I was a textual school. You just made this
But you're acting like the fact that you cited the scholars necessarily means that, by the way, where was it it didn't argue that the argument is on the basis of the words.
No, it doesn't. Well, then show me the evidence.
It said the word Proverbs is from that time period. And then it says that the Proverbs themselves are pre-monarchic.
Where are they? Who's talking? Who's citing it? Where's the text?
What?
You don't think we have texts that go back that far? We do. None of them cite Proverbs. None of the texts from that period cite Proverbs. No one mentions Proverbs. The first person to
that's an argument from silence. That scholars are saying that the book of Proverbs.
Scholars are making linguistic arguments on this.
No, they're not just making linguistic arguments. They're also making archaeological arguments.
There's no archaeological data to show that Solomon was right. There's no Solomon text in archaeology. I'm telling you that. There's nothing there.
Well, you're saying an argument from silence. You're saying these things, but what I'm showing you is that there's competing scholarly claims. How do we know what's true between these?
I would say what you're reading is probably outdated scholarship. When is that dated to? What year? What is that book from? What year is that book from?
How do you know?
What year?
What counts as outdated?
Because the most up-to-date, most rigorous academics are all agreeing that we don't have any evidence of the Bible. Now, there might have been some layers of Solomon that do go back that far.
What counts as outdated?
I don't know, 20 years ago.
So whatever book I cite, right?
No, it's 20 years probably. It's been 20 years.
And how do you still don't see how arbitrary this is?
No, it could still be correct, but I'm telling you, there's no evidence.
Well, I know you're telling me that, but you're not actually proving that. You're saying that when I give you scholars with
So
when
a scholar said something.
When I give you counter scholars, we're in a dilemma then where we have to figure out, well, how do we know which scholars are right or wrong? And I'm asking you, what tells you? And you said, well, it's got to be up to date. And I said, that's arbitrary. How do you know what the up to date is? You said, oh, it's got to be 20 years. This is all arbitrary.
You just asked me what I think is outdated, and I just gave you a number.
You're in a debate. That means you have to make good arguments, Neil.
But Jay, what I'm telling you is scholars can guess Solomon is dated to the 5th century or whatever. Fine. Based on linguistic
so now you're saying they're guessing. How do you know they're guessing?
Because we don't have any text from that period.
Well, you're just saying your position.
They all are guessing. None of these texts go back to that far. Do you not know that?
You're just asserting Neil, how do you know that?
Do you know that we have 0 biblical manuscripts that are older?
How do you know that?
Because we don't have a single manuscript of the Bible before the Dead Sea Scrolls.
You just keep asserting this. How do you know that assertion is true?
Because we don't have them. Well, show me where one exists. Is there one in the museum somewhere?
I'm giving you countertextual evidence from
scholars. And I'm saying that it doesn't exist.
Neil, physically. I know you're saying that.
There's no physical copy of it.
Neil, hang on. Let's see if we can untangle this. Okay, just a little bit here. All right. We'll start with Neil. Neil, I believe, are you saying your argument is there's no physical evidence for this?
Yes.
Okay. And then Jay will operate off that counter. Neil's saying there's no physical evidence, and we'll move from there. Go ahead, guys.
Again, the claim about the dating, and that would include dating actual physical texts and not later copies, would itself be subject to debate. And thus, when he said that we didn't have examples of proverbs prior to a certain century, and I gave scholarly claims that there are proverbs that go back to the pre-monarchic period, Neil then said, we don't have physical text. So he moved the goalpost away from scholarly claims to you have to have the physical copies. That's a fallacy to move the goalpost. And so that's what the point of the scholarly claims is, to say, Neil, if I give you counter scholarly claims and there's conservative scholars who date the text before what you would date them, what is the mechanism to know whose scholarly claims are correct? And your answer was to just reassert your position.
No, we take a holistic approach to this. So
how do we know that's the right way?
So not only, hold on, let me respond. Not only do we have no physical evidence, on top of that, we don't have, so for example, another thing that scholars do to test this out is let me finish my, I just let you talk. Let me talk. I'm not repeating my argument. I'm going to give you some more data.
You ignored my argument.
One of the things we know about how we know if texts survive or go back far enough is things like naming. People name their children after heroes. After 400 BC, you start seeing names in the sources of Moses, Abraham, Noah, all the heroes from the Old Testament. Before that, there's zero. There's zero. They don't have anyone with those names at all.
Well, hang on. Let me untangle this too. I'm sorry to step in here, guys, but I just got to make sure. So, I got your claim correct. You're talking about physical evidence, but Jay did give an argument to that. And I would like to hear what you have to say in regards to that argument, as he was addressing your argument of no
couldn't even
evidence.
restate the argument, perhaps.
You're saying you can come up with scholars who say that the more conservative scholars who dated past the pre-monarchic period. Yeah. I'd say where are they?
I just gave you one right there.
No, I would say where, how do you know this? Why are you just, because
Neil,
the linguist that I talked to say this is all circular, that they date a text, they go, Moses lived in 1200 BC.
Right.
Then they find a text in Hebrew that looks like it has the same
it's an appeal to
linguistic.
Neil.
Hold on a second. Point. They think they say they use axiom Moses is 1200 BC. Then they find then they use that Hebrew from that text and say that's 1200 BC Hebrew.
Not addressing
and
the
they
argument.
Find another text that looks like that Hebrew and go, it is also 1200 BC.
Cool storytelling.
It's circular reasoning.
Yeah, I mean, I do have to step in here. You are talking specifically to methodology here, and he's giving a specific argument that he wants contended with, and I do think it's fair. So you're saying we're at a lock here. You have your scholars, I have mine. Fair. You want to end it there? Is that what you're saying?
Well, the question is, you said that, well, if we have a competing claims of scholars thing going on, then it would just be going to the holistic approach. Yes. How do we know that the holistic approach is the right approach?
Because your scholars are just saying this text dates this period.
The
scholars I'm talking to, hold on, I'm not saying you have the same problem. I'm saying your scholars date the text of this period. I'm saying, how do they know that? Where the scholars I'm citing are going off archaeology. They're going off archaeology. They're going off namings. They're using the holistic. They're seeing that Jews in that period.
You're just telling the story again.
Hold on a second.
You're talking about methodology.
Give him a chance, Jay. Give him a chance, Jay.
If the Jews before 400 BC are making graven images and doing things on Sabbath and eating pork, they're not Torah observant, right?
Can you state what my argument is about the holistic approach and what you think I'm arguing?
You can go ahead.
You've not understood the argument yet?
No, I don't. You think that what I'm doing is not, you're saying it's your argument versus mine, but I'm saying going off.
Neil, no, that's not the argument.
What's the argument?
The argument is that when we have a contention about which scholars, and we're going to resolve it, I ask you, what would resolve this? How would we know whether it's conservative or liberal scholars or whatever, your scholars, my scholars, how would we resolve it? And you said we would go by the holistic approach.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Why would we? How do we know that that's the criteria to go to? That's the question. What's the proof? What's the good reason to believe that your arbitrary statement that it's the holistic thing?
Do you
How
know
we
what the
that's
horse?
true?
Do you not know what the historical method is?
Again, how do we know that the holistic approach is the right way to go?
Because it follows the historical method, and we go off the data, and we have the best
No.
possible. We
A
say this is the
holistic-
most likely
No, Neil.
scenario
Neil,
based
this
on
is
the
two
evidence.
different
This is the
things.
most likely scenario.
A holistic approach surveying scholars is not the same thing as the historical method. Those are two
Yes, it
different
is.
questions.
Yes,
No,
it
they're
is.
not.
These
No, one is
scholars who are
consensus.
applying the historical
Neil,
method.
One is consensus of scholars telling us.
I'm not
what's
talking
the
about
right
consensus of
position.
scholars.
Huh?
I'm not talking about the consensus of scholars.
You said it. We would go with the holistic approach.
Yes,
You're making
I'm
an argument for
talking about.
consensus. What are
Here's
you
one
talking about?
scholar who's a linguist. Here's what he's saying. Here's what his reasons are. Here's another
You said
scholar who's an
holistic, Neil.
archaeologist. Here's
Neil,
another
you-
scholar who's a textual scholar.
Neil, you
Here's
said
another scholar that's a
holistic.
holistic, and they're all applying the historical method. You don't do
No,
that. You just say the
Neil.
Bible's true.
Again, if they're using, all the scholars are using some form of a historical method, that's a deflection away from how do you know that the holistic approach is right? And you're saying, no, I didn't actually mean a consensus. What did you mean by holistic?
I said you go to each of these each of these
So a consensus.
yeah, but it's not a consensus in all. These are different fields that you put together, and then you say, wait a minute,
That's
there's
called
not even, not only is there no,
consensus doesn't have
hold
to
on,
be a field
you say,
specific.
we look at the
You said
data and we
Neil, you said
conclude, not
consensus
only is there no
is
evidence,
Hang on, Jay. Let him
No, it's the
respond.
opposite.
Let him respond. Go ahead.
not
Neil.
only is there no evidence, it's the opposite.
Again, what
So,
is
so
the
you have nothing, and I have
Neil,
a whole bunch of
Hang
data.
how
on,
do
let,
we
let
know
Jay
that-
respond now.
holism is the criteria that we go with?
I just explained that.
No, how do we all know this?
Well, you don't have to know it, I guess, because you're just
How does
going
the
off what
audience
one
know
scholar.
this? You
You're just
asserted
going
it.
off what one scholar
You
says. I
asserted
just
it, Neil. How do
I
we-
just gave you the answer.
How does everyone in the audience following your argument
How do you know you're
that
not a
your
brain in the vat?
holism
Hang on, Neil. Let him respond here. Go ahead, Jay.
Again, you keep circling back to listing various methodologies amongst different disciplines. That
Mhm.
doesn't tell me that a holistic approach of scholars amongst a bunch of different disciplines is the way to go.
Fine.
It's a non sequitur.
Then ignore it all. Go like this.
No,
Plug
we
your
don't-
ears and close your eyes to all the data around you. Do it. I don't
Neil,
care.
that's not what I'm arguing.
But
The
hang
world's
on.
gonna move on.
Your-
Whether
Hang
you
on,
believe
hang on,
it or
hang on,
not.
hang on, guys. Neil, we can't. We're not going to operate in I don't care, right?
I'm just saying.
I
you
would
don't have
like
to
a,
believe
I
it.
would like a response. Just as you gave an argument to Jay's responding to your argument, he's making an argument back. I would actually like the response to the argument. I'll hold his feet to the same fire if I see he's not responding to an argument. So I would like you to actually respond to his argument, please.
Okay. You said that I have a scholar right here from this book that says that the books of Solomon can go back to the pre-monarchical period, which would be 1000 BC plus. Wow, that's a crazy claim from my experience with scholarship. That's pretty fringe. I would say, how do you know that? So I would have to ask him how he knows that, what his evidence is, why he's making that conclusion. And then I would go to other scholars in archaeology. I'll go to scholars in textual criticism, scholars who do linguistics, scholars who study Egypt, scholars who study, and I would go and find all the data and say, wait a minute, where is the evidence for the Torah? If it's
You know,
not
you
there,
fundamentally
then
are
they're
not understanding that it's an epistemic question. I'm not asking you, can you list a bunch of scholars that are liberal scholars?
Empirical
in a lot of
data.
disciplines?
That's
I
how we
understand.
know.
Neil, stop interrupting me because it's a really clear, simple argument. I don't dispute that people go and look at other scholars in other disciplines.
Mhm.
Your resolution to the challenge of competing scholarly claims was, quote, go to the holistic approach. Maybe that is true. And all
Yeah.
I'm saying is, how do we know that that's the way to resolve it? Because, sometimes,
How do you know?
Neil, that's a tu quoque.
I don't care. I'm committing to quoque. I want to know how you
Thank
know.
you. He's admitting that he's doing.
I'm
quoque.
admitting it. How do you know, Jay?
Well, I don't have the problem of competing
you don't have the
because I
problem.
don't accept.
So you
I
don't even
accept-
have to know.
I-
You just
Stop.
accept that it's true.
I don't accept that holistic ad hoc is an argument. Why would
You
I
don't,
have to
you don't
answer your
accept the
problem?
you don't accept the you don't accept the data. You don't accept
No,
scholars.
Neil.
You don't accept.
If I present contrary scholars and you
So
have
what?
scholars, and
Scholars
your
say all types of things.
Neil, your answer was holism, and then I asked you to flesh that out, and you say I don't care.
And I asked you, how do you know? And you said, I don't have to know.
Well,
Neil,
hang
it's
on.
not
the
a
difference?
problem. It's not my argument. It was your argument.
Yeah, we're going here in circles. As to Neil's question, I think it's a fair question. He is asking, what sort of methodology would you appeal to, Jay, for this? And I do think that that's fair for you to answer
Sure.
that.
Right. No, I don't disagree with scholars or the approach of scholarly, academia, et cetera. I was spent time in academia. I have one of my good friends is an Orthodox archaeologist. So there are people who do this, but also have a conservative perspective.
Sure.
And a lot of archaeology backs up the Bible. This kind of stuff comes out all the time. My buddy
Like what?
James is an archaeologist. He blogs about this regularly. He has a PhD in archaeology. So
Mhm.
I have scholars and friends too. My point was just simply that it's not resolved by throwing the claims of scholars back and forth, because there's
Okay.
no way to know if there's conflicting claims if you get to this issue of it being an epistemic question. So again, the way that we interpret the textual data, the scholarly data, the academic data is going to be governed by our paradigm. So you notice
Mhm.
that Neil's not going to accept the scholars that I present or mention, but
Mhm.
I'm not going to be accepting his. So that proves that we have kind of a fundamental issue. That's why I raised the question of how would we resolve it if there's a scholarly disagreement and we're throwing scholars back and forth. It can't be resolved by just Neil saying,
And I don't
I'll
just reject. I don't just. I'm sorry, I cut you off. Are you done?
no, it's not resolved by an arbitrary ad hoc principle of it's just holistic. Okay, maybe that's true, Neil. Maybe we do go to a holistic thing, but what does that actually mean? And why ought we think that that's true? Maybe it is true, but I need a good reason to believe it's true. Your answer to that was just to give a bunch of methodologies that are used. That doesn't tell me that holism is the right approach. Maybe it is.
Okay. And I would even respond to that and say, I don't just deny conservative scholars because I don't like what they're saying. I accept. In fact, I'm convinced by Christian
you
scholars
did a
all the
minute ago.
time.
But
I
you
know-
did.
Well, you didn't give me a reason why he says that. He just wrote it down. So what? How did he make that? How did he come to that conclusion?
Well,
I need
Neil,
to
I
know
could
that.
say that your liberal scholars just wrote it down.
Well, let me give you an
do
example.
reject conservative scholars. You just did.
Dr. Schmidt, who just came out with published a book about Josephus saying it's authentic. I was convinced by some of his arguments. He made good arguments off the Greek. He demonstrated why he made his arguments that
What does
Josephus.
that have to do with?
I'm just showing you it's not. I'm not just denying scholars because they're conservative Christians.
Okay, but in this case,
if they bring arguments that
I don't
the
even know if
data, bring arguments that supportive of the data, I'll be convinced by it. It just doesn't happen to the point where
epistemic questions are prior to scientific questions. Is the
I
problem?
know that.
Huh?
I know that.
You do.
You're saying our
Then why didn't you
worldview as
answer
a
the
whole-
question about holism, and how do we know that that's the right way?
Because my worldview accounts for things like being objective is
Okay, and
Yeah.
maybe it does, but why ought we to think that holism is the right approach here? You just admitted that some scholars can be in the minority and be correct,
why
right?
ought because we want to follow the data to its final conclusion, to the most
No, but again,
Hold on.
you're missing the point. How does that, what you're saying there, tell me that holism is the right approach? Maybe it is, but what is the basis for that?
because that's how we discover things in the world.
So that's just restating the thing. in question.
Empiricist. Well, you just asked me a question. That's the answer to it.
So the answer is just a circle?
How is that a circle?
Because the thing in question is an epistemic issue, and you're saying that, well, we'll just be an empiricist. How does that resolve that holism is the
We
right answer?
follow the most rigorous
Neil,
methodologies.
can't-
That's how we discover things in the
Again,
world. Is
it's
that
begging
not
the
true or
question.
no?
So the rigorous one is the one that's your position?
Yeah, the rigorous methodology.
Well, again, so it's just
Why wouldn't
restating
it be?
that you just
Why
follow
wouldn't
me.
it be?
So you're just saying follow me.
So I'm not saying me. I'm not saying.
You just
don't
said the
you?
rigorous
When you
position. I asked
have
you,
you ever
yours
had a
was-
family member that had cancer?
What?
Ever? You know anyone that ever had cancer?
Neil, you
What do
just
they
said
do? They
your
go to
position is
a
the
witch
rigorous
doctor?
one.
Do they pray?
Hang
They go
on,
to
hang
the
on.
best-
This is
Well, this
becoming
is
this is
emotional
becoming a
appeal.
series of non
Because no, this is
sequiturs.
actually I'm actually making a point here. You
Okay,
go
I'll
to-
allow,
emotional
hang on,
appeal.
hang on, Neil. I'll allow the point, but if it's becoming a non sequitur and we're not getting
Sure.
to the answer to this question, then I'm going to step in. So go ahead.
Okay. When someone has cancer, they don't just go to their own devices or ask if pray about it or go to the witch doctor down the street. They go to the best experts, whether it's the hospital PhDs or Roswell Institute, something where there's literal experts who know what they're doing. They want the best experts that are out there who have the best credentials, period. And you can use that. You can see the same thing for all these other fields of study, and not just medicine, but even history, even things like the humanities. The same thing applies.
Okay. Is it possible that sometimes the scholarship that's conservative is in the minority and could be correct, like you said with the guy about Josephus.
Yeah.
Okay. So that makes my point that scholarly consensus and holism isn't going to be a reliable way to go about it.
Well, when it comes to the Bible, the consensus usually leans in the direction of the most of the scholars that are in the field of
Neil,
study of
I'm
the Bible
asking you
are
why we
from
should
churches.
follow holism and consensus.
I'm not talking about consensus. I'm talking about
You
the
just said
experts in
consensus.
particular fields.
Hang on,
You
but
just
this is
said
the
consensus.
question. This is the question at hand that Jay has asked this argument now twice, and I think it's fair to answer to it.
That's
He's
why I brought up.
asking,
Yeah.
he's asking the ought claim, and I'd like you to respond to the ought claim.
That's why I brought up the cancer thing. You go to the experts in the particular field who are the most well established, who know what they're doing.
Neil, the question is, how do we know that we ought to go to the holistic approach or a consensus?
Because if you want to be right, you do it. If you want to be right, you do it. If you want to be right or wrong.
The question is, how do we know that that's the right approach that we ought to take?
Well, no, it's a fair point, but I would like to hear the counter evidence
So
before you just.
so you don't have an argument.
It's not a too
Yeah,
quick
well,
way.
hang on. To be fair,
It is.
to be totally
it's
fair,
not.
okay. Well, Neil, to be totally fair here, that is not actually answering the argument. That's asking him to now state a position.
Mhm.
I do think it's fair for you to answer to the argument that he's making. I would make him answer to yours as well, like I have.
It just did though.
Okay.
I mean, that if
Do you want
could-
to move on to another topic? Maybe.
yeah,
This is just kind of going around.
you don't have to follow the expert. You can follow the conservative scholars. Fine.
Okay.
Again, I'm not even. It's an epistemic question about how do we
You're
know
asking
that
about
holism
oughts
is the
and
right
stuff.
approach.
And
I gave you a
maybe-
counter, Neil. I gave you a counter to why sometimes consensus is wrong, and you
is.
admitted that can happen. And
Yeah.
so I'm asking you, how do we know then that we should follow the consensus?
I just told you.
Okay. Do you want to move on to? I'd like
Yeah.
to ask you about because you made a big deal about the evil God of the Old Testament and his actions. Isn't it just the case that if infants are dashed against stones, wouldn't, in your worldview, that just be the one manifesting?
No, because in this material realm, we are farthest away from the one, and because of the flux of our reality, things can like this do happen. So the one has a will, but farthest away from the one, which is where the flux is, there are opposing forces that do things that even if we have a piece of the one within us, and that which is our full potentiality, our telos, if you will, to Aristotle's phrase that you also use in your worldview. Sometimes people don't follow that and they do evil things because we're in the flux. We don't all have direct access to the good. That's the problem of evil solved by my worldview. Your worldview just says God let Satan do it.
So what things in this lower dimension are good or evil?
Whatever's whatever's in appliance with virtue. Virtue.
How do we know what are the virtues?
So those have been debated over time through the dialectic, through the Socratic method, and we have texts that talk about the virtues, like the golden sentences.
We don't know.
No, we do.
Okay,
they're debated, but
do we go with the consensus again?
Honesty,
the Platonic
honor.
consensus.
What?
Honesty?
Yeah.
Okay. How do we know that? I thought you said earlier it was just virtue, right?
Yeah, but because
Platonic
we can come up with things that lead to virtue. That's the highest of the pinnacle of good.
And
virtue
how do
is
we
the
know?
highest good.
Okay.
Then there are other principles that are good that lead to virtue, like being honest.
Right.
And
what's the epistemic justification for knowing that?
My worldview accounts for it.
No. How do we know that within your worldview, honesty is the key one?
Because it leads to virtue.
But honesty was supposed to be the virtue. Isn't it one of the virtues? Honesty leads to itself.
It leads to virtue. It's virtue is the highest. Virtue is the highest good you can attain.
Honesty is a virtue. You don't know that?
Yes.
So honesty leads to honesty?
No, it's one of the lesser virtues that leads to capital V.
How do you know the gradation?
Arete.
How do you know which ones are lower and higher?
Well, because there's different ways to debate this. Negation we can use. We can debate it. We can
How
talk
does
about what is
negating
good.
tell you that honesty is a lower virtue than another?
We can talk. I just said we debate and we negate. We figure
How
out
does
what is not
debating
good.
tell you that?
Knowing what not is good, what is not good.
What is the
figure out what
epistemic
is good?
principle that we're
I just
supposed to
gave it.
follow?
I just told you.
No, you didn't. You said debating. That's a thing that people
That's
do.
that's the same thing you
That's
do.
not an epistemic principle. It's an action.
Yeah, but that's how we figured these things out over time.
So that's a
Gnosis.
method.
It's what Gnosis is.
It's not a principle.
Well, the principle is having the dogma of attaining virtue. That's
So
the principle.
wait a minute. I thought you were about reason, and now you're saying it's dogma.
Yeah, the only dogma.
Why should we
that
accept your
Platonists-
dogma?
The only Platonist that virtue that the only dogma that Platonists hold is attaining virtue.
Yeah, but
Virtue is the highest good. That's it. Because if you
again,
have more than one
honesty
dogma,
is one of
if you
the
have more than one
virtues.
dogma, you end up conflicting at some point.
Neil, this is all just gibberish sophistry.
No, it's not.
Honesty is
This
one
is
of
all-
the
this is what the
virtues.
Neoplatonists wrote. This is what the Neoplatonists wrote.
That's an appeal to authority. Who cares?
I'm just saying. You're saying it's all nonsense. This has been written about
No,
for thousands
but
of years.
so what? There's a lot of ancient writers that wrote nonsense, right?
I'm just giving you the answers.
Okay, so what we need is good reasons to know that honesty is the one that leads us to the higher virtues. How do we know that?
My worldview isn't in contradiction like yours is.
That's
So
a tu quoque.
we're debating. No, it's
That
not.
is a
We're
tu
debating
quoque.
who's
I'm
more
asking, Neil,
coherent.
just explain to me. I
No,
want to
my
be,
worldview is
wanna
more
be an
coherent than
Platonist.
yours. So that's why people should listen to me over you.
Fine. Let's say Christianity is contradictory. What is the reason that we ought to believe that honesty is the virtue that leads to the highest virtues?
Because you haven't demonstrated any other worldview to be better.
Because I haven't done something? What?
Yes.
No, I'm asking from your worldview. Why are we? What's the epistemic principle here?
Because of the predictive success and for example.
How does honesty give predictive success?
Well, no, hold on a second. When we look back in history, we can see wherever these Platonists were, there was renaissances. So when they were kicked out of Constantinople, hold on a second. I'm going to make a point here. They were kicked out of Constantinople after having the greatest empire ever, the Roman Empire, inheriting things from the Greeks, the greatest, the Pax Romana, all the way up to the late antiquity. They become Christian. They kick the Platonists out. They go to the east. They go to Babylon, and then they even lead to a quote unquote Islamic golden age because they're reading the text of Aristotle.
Did you measure that
when they
scientifically?
When they come back to Macedonia, when they come back to business, there's a Macedonian mini Renaissance, and then there's another Renaissance in Italy.
Did you measure that scientifically?
When we can look at history and say
that's arbitrary.
Okay, let me ask
how do
you
we
this.
know your criteria?
How do we know your criteria of a successful society is correct? Because we're asking about virtue, which would be the basis for what the successful society is. So it's a circle. Sure. Okay. So let me ask you this: Aristotle and Galen.
Huh?
Aristotle and Galen. You know who they are?
Uh-huh.
So Galen was the textbook for medical text. He was written the 2nd century AD. Aristotle's 4th century BC.
Aristotle's not a Neoplatonist.
Well, actually, Middle Platonists and Neoplatonists and later Platonists take Aristotle and merge it with. So we can use it. We use Aristotle. So I'm not talking. We use Aristotle. You're wrong. So what I'm saying is,
how am I wrong? He's not a Neoplatonist.
I didn't say he was. I said we use Aristotle either way.
How is Aristotle going to prove Neoplatonism?
I'm showing you Aristotle's works and Galen's works were the central textbooks for medical science and science all the way up until the 16th century.
But how does that prove Neoplatonism?
Because Christianity couldn't do anything to improve on that. We had to wait till my worldview was back.
Christianity
we had to wait till my worldview was back for things to get. No, it's not.
It's a fallacy.
How?
Yeah. To say, well, Christianity couldn't do this is not answering the question of how do we know that because Aristotle.
You're asking about worldviews.
Neil,
I'm showing you.
How do we know that proves? The question was about proving Neoplatonism, and you said, well, Aristotle did some good things, and then Galen wrote some medical stuff, and Christianity couldn't do it. That doesn't prove Neoplatonism.
Right. Christianity couldn't improve on these basic science texts. And then
Neil, how does that prove Neoplatonism from Aristotle and Galen? This is ridiculous.
Because we're doing a worldview versus
Aristotle
worldview
and
debate,
Galen
right?
weren't Neoplatonists.
We're doing a worldview versus worldview debate, right?
They weren't Neoplatonists.
Which one's more coherent?
What does it have to do with proving Neoplatonism?
Because my worldview is more coherent than yours.
But they're not Neoplatonists.
I didn't say they were. Why are you being bad faith?
Then it's irrelevant.
Neoplatonists draw from Galen and Aristotle. They're part of
after them, and it's irrelevant.
I know that. I'm after them too.
You know that. It's
Oh,
irrelevant.
this
Thank you that you know
makes
that
no
it's
sense. I'm after Aristotle. I can borrow from Aristotle. Why not?
Neil,
you think
how
I'm,
does
you think I'm
them
supposed to
being
not? You think
after
I
Neil,
can't read Aristotle and learn from Aristotal?
how does this prove
I have some sort of
Neoplatonism?
metaphysical thing that stops
How
me
does
from
it
reading
prove
Aristotle?
Neoplatonism, Neil?
Because I said my worldview is more coherent than yours.
Because you said it. Wow. Okay.
Well, it is. I proved it.
Hang on.
I proved it in this debate.
Gentlemen, Neil, Jay's done a lot of the cross-exam here. You haven't really had too much chance to cross-exam back. I'm going to give you the last 10 minutes to do that. Go ahead when you're ready.
I don't want to get into the dating of the text. It's stupid. We already get on that. So I go, we talk about the Trinity. What about the, I haven't heard much of you defending things like God being jealous or God not being omniscient or not even being omnipotent. For example, when the iron chariots came and in Judges, the tribe of Judah got wiped out. Well, doesn't that show God's not all powerful? What's the response to that?
No, there's often statements that explain why they lost, and in every case, God explains that you lose when you're wicked. But by the way, you said that it's okay. You said it's okay if jealousy is used. Well, why cannot the word?
You made a point
Neil,
there. I'm doing the cross examination here. Hold on a second.
You're not letting me answer.
Judges, but you want to move on to
no, I'm not. I'm explaining.
Okay, finish your point. Go ahead.
Okay, so again, the anthropomorphic language. Again, if God says something like He's jealous, you said, okay, fine. You could say maybe that's anthropomorphic earlier, but if jealousy can be anthropomorphic, as you admitted, then regret can as well. So I think that clears up the jealousy and regret issue. But when God says that you will lose your battles, this is explained in Deuteronomy that you will be trodden upon when you're wicked. So it's not because of a lack of.
Doesn't say they're wicked.
In Deuteronomy, when there's covenant sanctions, God warns them and He says,
I know
if let me finish. So if you are wicked, you will lose your battles and be trodden upon. So what I'm saying is that when there's an explanation like that, it doesn't mean anything close to denying divine omniscience. It just means that the reason that they were defeated was because of this, but ultimately because of God punishing them.
Okay, I'm talking about Judges, not talking about Deuteronomy. It specifically says, Judges 1:19, Yahweh or the Lord. Hold on, it's my turn, dude.
It doesn't matter if it's Judges because that's.
Hold on. Yahweh was with Judah, or Theos in Greek. Theos was with Judah, and He drove the inhabitants of the mountain, but He could not drive out the inhabitants. Still talking about Yahweh, because they had chariots of iron. Nothing to do with Judah being wicked.
There's a similar statement where you have, for example, Jesus says He goes into a town and it says, and He could not do any miracles there because of their unbelief. So this is a principle.
I'm not. Why are you talking about?
Neil, I'm giving other examples of this principle in Scripture, that just because that text doesn't say that they're wicked, it doesn't follow from that there's not another text that comments on that and explains that.
Where?
When you're wicked, this is why you're defeated. And sometimes the text explain that God allowed them to be defeated via
this one doesn't do that, though. This one just says that Yahweh couldn't win the battle because they had iron chariots. There's nothing about wicked.
Everybody interprets text holistically, including Platonists and Neoplatonists. If I took one phrase of Plato out of context and I said this phrase disproves all Platonism, you would say you got to look at the whole body of Platonic corpus. You can't just take one passage. And so that's a
but if you had a contradiction,
everybody does.
If you had one text that was in contradiction to something else, we would look at it. We don't have to take the whole thing. And in this particular one here, it's clear what's happening here. Yahweh could not drive them out.
No, you're just saying it's clear, but
you say anything. You say anything about them being wicked.
You just admitted what's called canonical interpretation, which is that, yes, you can look at the rest of the text to see if it's reconciled or if it synthesizes. And then you turn around and said, but here, this one is clear as a contradiction. Well, again, it's not if you believe in a holistic interpretation, which, again, if I brought the Platonic corpus here and I found one phrase, wouldn't you call me out and say, you don't have the right to say one phrase out of context from the rest of the corpus, right?
Well, actually, the Platonists don't really care if you think we would have a debate about maybe you do have a contradiction. Maybe you did find a contradiction here. Let's talk about it.
So you wouldn't care if Platonic texts were being interpreted improperly.
Okay, that's not, you mean that way, then yeah, we would debate that. But so you're saying because of this doctrine that when something bad happens to the Judahites, they were wicked. So no matter what it says, if they fell, they were wicked.
No, specifically, not anything bad, but specifically, if you do not obey me, you will lose your battles and be trodden upon. That's one of the penal sanctions in Deuteronomy.
Right, but you got to at least admit this particular text here in Judges 1 is very unclear about there being some sort of divine punishment happening.
Again, it's when we read holistically the way the covenant functions, all of the battles and all the situations where they lose, the implication is that when Israel is unfaithful, they will lose the battles. In the same way, when Jesus walks into that town and it says, and he was unable to do miracles there because of their lack of faith, it's not because of his omniscience that his omnipotence was failing that day. It's because he chose to not reward them and to reciprocate. It's a reciprocal relationship where he chose to not do the miracles because they did not have faith. Likewise, Yahweh chose to not give Israel the battle because they're unfaithful.
Your text in the New Testament says that they didn't have faith. Judges 1 does not say that. Judges 1 says, it even says earlier that Yahweh said, Judah, go up, and I have delivered the land into your hands.
Text holistically. That's what I said earlier.
But these texts weren't written. These texts were written at different times by different authors.
It doesn't have to say within the text every implication to mean what I'm saying.
I understand that now that you have a church that does exegesis and apologetics, then now you can interpret things holistically.
Everyone does exegesis. You just admitted that with Plato.
Right, but I'm saying these texts were written for different people in different times.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't necessarily written for a canonical church to be taking this holistic thing.
Well, I mean, that's your assumption as an unbeliever, but I have a different paradigm, a different assumption. So, but again, that's why I asked you wouldn't you agree that you can interpret Platonic texts holistically? For example, even within one Platonic dialogue, right? You wouldn't take one line and say, well, this appears to be contrary to all the other things in this dialogue, right? Wouldn't it be fair to interpret it holistically?
That's fair.
Okay, so all I'm saying is
that I'm being good faith. I'm trying to say
interpretation between canonical versus taking one verse.
Let me try to understand you better. You're saying that whatever this guy wrote doesn't really matter because
no, it's not
the
at all.
church has to interpret it anyway. Is that what you're saying? No,
this doesn't even necessitate bringing the church in. I'm just saying that canonically or holistically, even in Jewish literature, for example, you wouldn't take one verse out of the context of Judges and read it against all the rest of the book of Judges, right? Now, you could do that, like you can do it, but it's not really fair to any text to operate that way. And all I'm saying is that from our perspective, that verse would be read, for example, in the context of the book of Judges and the rest of the Old Testament, where we have other explanations as to, well, why is it that the Israelites sometimes lose these battles? Well, in the covenant sanctions, it says, when you're unfaithful, you will be trodden upon and you won't win the battles.
You got one question left, Neil, and then we got to wrap it for calls.
Yeah. Okay. My last question is: there's minor contradictions too that I'm not going to make a big deal out of. Like 1 Chronicles 21, it tells the same story that's in 2 Samuel 24, and it starts off: Satan rose up against Israel and incited David. Yes, incited David to take a census, and then
God did it in the other one.
And then God did another one, and then you have another one where you have in the New Testament. And I want to get your question. You can. Sure. I'm not just going to put this aside.
It's fine.
In the New Testament, it talks about Quirinius doing a census,
right?
Which we can actually locate through reading Josephus and other sources and triangulate that he would have been governor around 7 to 6 BC or AD. I'm sorry, which is when the census would have happened. Where in Matthew it says Jesus was born in 4 BC. How do we know that? Because Herod died in a certain year of Augustus's reign. I can't remember exactly, but it leads to 4 BCE. Now, someone like myself, when I'm reading this stuff, I'm seeing these contradictions. I know these are minor. These aren't big theological major. I'm not saying this like shatters your religion or anything, but I'm reading these things as just a person with doing regular reasoning, inductive reasoning, just reading these texts and going, wow, these are some contradictions. Why ought I believe in the text like this? Or why ought I follow some sort of religion like this?
So the question of the situation of God allowing the evil to occur, and then David took a census, and then it says God moved David to take a census, and it says Satan moved David to take a census. The answer is that in many cases, if you look at the Exodus narrative as well, you have the explanation that when Pharaoh, quote, hardened his heart, there's one passage where it says Pharaoh hardened his heart against Moses and against God, and there's another passage where it said God hardened Pharaoh's heart. So one passage says Satan did it, one passage said God did it. The answer to that is that God allowed Satan to have dominion and to do it. So it's a really simple resolution that and there's other cases where, for example, other cases where, for example, you have people being deceived. One of the prophets has a lying spirit, and it says that God allowed a lying spirit to be in the mouth of the prophet. So God allows evil, and you can speak of things as direct and indirect causation. So one passage is talking about the ultimate indirect causation. The other passage is talking about the direct immediate causation that Satan's moving them to do it. So, and then when it comes to the claims about dating and that kind of stuff with the census or whatever, again, from my paradigm, if I believe that divine revelation is true, I'm going to have that as my judge of the secular unbelieving scholars. And again, the reason I was saying that about with holism earlier was that just to illustrate that you have a paradigm and you have scholars that you're going to accept on the basis of your presuppositions and your pre-commitments. I have the same situation. I have my presuppositions, my pre-commitments, and that's why really the reconciliation has to always go back to worldviews.
Okay, gentlemen, I'm going to give a real quick wrap up, 2 minutes each, because we're way over time. I know that that's not a lot of time, but I want to make sure that we keep this confined to something close to 3 hours here. So, Neil, Jay opened first, so I'm going to give him the last close. So go ahead with your opening or closing statement. You got 2 minutes.
Well, just want to admit, Jay's a good debater. I knew this wasn't going to be easy, and he can get out of some good pickles there. But I ultimately do think that my worldview is simpler, accounts for things just as well as his does. And you even have modern empiricist scholars, Platonists, like I mentioned, Werner Heisenberg, who attest to these things, and I could see that the things out in the real world work in sync with what my worldview is. So things like evolution and atoms and the age of the universe, stuff like that, where I don't have to fight that for any particular textbook, or Jay does. I think that's where I think we both agree on sort of like the metaphysical reality of there being a perfect God in the beginning, who, whether you call it a trinity or a triad, and emanates these things, or you don't believe in the emanations, but the essence and energies distinction thing that Orthodoxy has. I mean, you can read stuff like Saint Dionysius, the Areopagite, put him side by side with someone like Proclus, and you see a lot of this stuff does line up. Now, I agree with Jay. There are fundamental big differences that are going to be drastic, which ends up with debates like this where it can get pretty nasty. But I think my worldview, I think I did a good job. I think my worldview is more coherent than Jay's.
Okay, Jay, you got 2 minutes.
Yeah, I want to thank Neil for doing the debate. It was an enjoyable debate, and I didn't think it was nasty. I thought we actually had a great conversation. It got heated, but it wasn't over the top. So I would say I think from Neil we didn't really hear a convincing, coherent argumentation about why his position is correct. We heard a lot of claims, a lot of assertions about Neoplatonism, and we saw some appeals to authority. And well, this physicist today had this view, and my view is simpler. Well, it's funny because when I debated Daniel Hakikachu, he said, look, Islam is true because it's simpler. Well, Islam has a monad. Neil has a monad. There's other positions that have this sort of monad. How would we know what amongst the monad positions is true? Because they all appeal to principles like simple, or because it's scientific, or because it follows the data, or again, these are a lot of appeals that don't actually put any rubber to the road. They don't actually give us any meat to know, well, wait a minute, why is it Neoplatonism and not Iamblichus or Plotinus or Proclus or any of the other Middle Platonists and later Platonists? There's no real way to know or to see that any of those positions are anything other than something totally antithetical to modern scientism, which again, Neil wants to have his foot in both camps. He wants to be an ancient Neoplatonic mystic, but he also wants to have this scientific perspective. And he said, well, I wasn't trying to appeal to scientists. I just think that empiricism is true. Well, again, empiricism is not the same thing as Neoplatonism at all. In fact, they're typically pretty much
very quickly, Jay.
Yeah, quickly. So I think that Neil did not give a coherent view. I think that the Orthodox perspective is coherent, and maybe we could have a part 2 or something going more into Orthodoxy or something.
Happy to have you guys back on again. I understand that I am known for being a tough moderator on both sides, and so you felt like I was being unfair at certain points, then I did my job properly. Diving into super chats here. Caller's going to stack up on the back end at this point. So, Drunk Batman gives 5 Crucible memberships. Appreciate it. Appreciate the membership. Appreciate the membership. Appreciate the membership. Congrats on the win, Jay. Now, just so you know, this happened at the beginning of the debate. So, I guess this person had some sort of clairvoyance. Unfortunately, I have to be up for work in 5 hours. Well, that sucks because you missed a great debate. Thanks for the 5 gifted Crucible membership. To the grifter host, take my money, damn it. I will. I appreciate it. This Gnostic guy sure is a word salad generator. Says, get great. We was fingers, says Austin. Appreciate that. Jay is pulling from Plato and Aristotle. GI is pulling from Hesiod and Ovid. Is that
Hesiod and Ovid? Well, that's
Hesiod
more,
and
those are more
Ovid.
poets. Those are the poets.
Okay. Easy WJ. Well, Emmanuel, who sends in 50 Mexican pesos, don't be fooled. That's like $3.99. Says, not all assertions are justifications. Not all super chats count for shit. This one sure doesn't. I totally agree. You should be deported for that super chat, except you live in Mexico. Straight out of Arkham. For it says Mr. Funds Wrecker for $5. Beef Sleazy for 10 says, what I'm hearing is bro developed a worldview that allows for evolution to not contradict it. What an idiot. Evolution is his real god, LMAO. Anything you want to say to that, Neil?
Well, it's just it's what it is according to Heisenberg, it's the becoming of the what does he say? He says something like the turning into the noose, like we're moving to our final form.
Okay. The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing. Socrates.
That's good. Good stuff.
Yeah, Smokey says Neil's worldview comes from the game Cruelty Squad. God bless Dyer and God bless the Eastern Orthodox Christians. $10 says 4.7K viewers and less than 1,000 likes. Do better. We did a lot better. The San Joe Savage for 20 says, how does monism solve for the Gettier challenge? It seems to fail right at the start with epistemology, given the impersonal nature of the one, making truth inaccessible. I think that's for you, Neil.
That's the one. Are they talking about? Is that another name for the one in the many problem?
I'm not going to comment on as to what it is that he's referencing. Just how
Gettier?
Does monism solve for the Gettier challenge?
I don't know. I'm not sure what the Gettier challenge is, to be honest.
So it has to do with another layer of justification in the classical JTB not being sufficient. So you also have to have a justification to not accidentally have knowledge that's correct. In other words, you have to demonstrate that you actually could know that what was correct wasn't just accidental.
Yeah, I'll have to look into that and check and come up with something better.
Why would God exist in such a way to make his presence blatantly known to such beings who identify as Gnostic?
I'm not actually Gnostic. I use the term because I did have a phase where I was really into Gnosticism after I was leaving Christianity, and I started my channel as talking about Gnosticism. So it was like scholarship on Gnosticism. That's kind of what it was.
And if anybody today is upsetty spaghetti with your fine moderator, just remember, I was requested for this debate by both debaters, so take it up with them. This one comes in from Suko, says, my father equals a person. Me equals a person. We're the same person, I guess. This is the one in the mini problem I think he's going back to or trying to.
Will this be towards Jay then?
I think it's towards you. My father equals a person.
person.
Me equals a person.
Yeah, this is the quantifier shift fallacy. It's probably for Neil.
Yeah, we're not the same person. It's a word. That's a word concept fallacy, wouldn't that be? Like person, we're just
The quantifier shift fallacy.
Yeah. So
Abstract says, I'm willing to hear this guy out, but come on, don't straw man the Trinity. This one comes in from Austin, says, did bro Google Muslim arguments against the Trinity before this?
I don't think Muslims believe in emanations in the noose, do they? Do they?
No arguments against the Trinity.
Oh, I guess. Yeah, I guess they would use similar. Yeah.
Yeah, some of them.
I didn't use the Muslim arguments.
Drew Breesus for 10 says 30 to 37 trillion cells equals one human.
Yeah. Those are the parts.
This one comes in from Well Emmanuel. He's not going to be able to eat for a week, sending all that Mexican currency to us. He says, if punishment and sacrifice are tools, so to speak, for our salvation, that is, they help us repent. How does that mean God requires something for his perfection? Any takers on that?
Well, one thing I would just briefly say is that I did not get to Neil's objection about God needing in terms of sacrifice, but even within the Old Testament, from the Orthodox perspective, we don't think that God had those sacrifices because he needed the anything from the created order. They were typological for the coming work of Christ, and that's why David says in Psalm 51 that sacrifice and offering you do not desire. So in one sense, God laid that down as a pedagogical tool within the ancient world where there's a lot of idolatry, but it's also not necessary from God's perspective. And that's why Paul says in Hebrews that blood and animals and blood offerings did not appease God.
How do you logically apply laws and concepts of this reality to something incomprehensible that exists outside of this reality?
What do you mean? Like, it's for me?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I already said I account for this with the nous, which is the intellect and form, logos and reason. So things like these concepts of is that what they mean? Like logically apply concepts of this reality, something incomprehensible that exists. Yeah, I mean that's kind of what I said. I'm making metaphysical arguments to account for these things.
This one comes in from Darth Jeff, who says, "Holy filibuster, bro." I think a lot of people thought that there was a filibuster because they weren't familiar with the particular format of the debate. The first hour of the debate, for those of you who came in later, was designed to be a 10-10-10 with rebuttals and then closings before we got to the open end of the debate. I know it's a bit of a different format, but it helps both debaters set the stage for what it is that they're actually going to be arguing. Patriot Muss for 10 says, Gregor Mendel was a priest and a geneticist. There were religious figures who were geologists and hypothesized the earth was old. To say the church can't hold a scientific position is ludicrous.
Yeah, but I was just saying that they don't have a particular position on the age being old or young, which is fair. I mean, it's better than dogmatically asserting it's 6,000. In my worldview. Maybe Jay doesn't agree, but whatever.
Neil, you should have just barfed on the floor because that would have been more coherent than your rebuttal.
Nice.
This one comes in from the San Joe Savage for 20, says, GI, your objections to the Trinity is premised on grammatical errors and a word concept fallacy. St. Basil addresses the misreading of John 1 multiple times on the Holy Spirit and letters against enemies. Or, I'm sorry, is that,
you know me.
Pronounce it. Yeah, know me. Okay, gotcha.
I'd like to know what the grammatical errors were. That's kind of if it's grammatical, I mean, I'm saying it. Is it because I'm saying it wrong? Is that what they're saying?
Take my emanation of cash. I will.
Nice.
Nostards, list of top 100 debunked misconceptions of Christianity.
Read Irenaeus. That's true. Irenaeus was
Emil says,
debunker.
question for Jay. Can you give us an undetermination of scientific theory that Gnostic has used stone to determine the age of the world?
That Gnostic has used?
Yeah, can you give us an underdetermination of scientific theory that Gnostic has used?
Yeah, I mean, I think the point there is just that, like, you could have a lot of data that two different theories or two different systems might conceivably make sense of. And so the point of underdetermination of data is just that more and more data isn't going to tell you which theory to go with. So the point is that you got to have some other kind of argument beyond just more data or more science papers to deal with the problem of the underdetermination of data. Hence the phrase itself, underdetermination of data, meaning that there's not enough data to tell you which paradigm or model is true. So I don't know how to explain that from his view.
Project Bid for 10 says the problem is that either the one contains differentiation, so it isn't simple, or it contains none, so it can't explain multiplicity. The structureless source cannot yield a structured world.
Yep.
That's where the I think it's Plotinus who comes up with the idea of the emanations to solve that. The emanations means you can have a spark of the one and also be different from the one. So it's not just strict monism where we're all one, man. It's not that.
Question. I'm sorry. I wonder if this one came in twice.
It looks like it.
No. I'm sorry. I must have backed up slightly. This one comes in from Jeremiah. It says, GI's problem with God's commands for sacrifices, as well as atonement by Christ, stems from his complete lack of research and understanding of the Orthodox view of atonement.
Okay.
This one comes in from Cooler, who says, Nostar keeps reading info someone else is writing for him on a screen.
Like I cheated or something? Yeah, right. The only thing I looked up was Orthodox scholars who say the Earth is, or who say Solomon is in 150 BC text.
Okay, listen, I think it's perfectly acceptable when you're using sources in a debate to pull up the sources in the debate. And sometimes that may require a Google or something like this if you don't have the source on hand. I think that's totally fair. No, Neil, you never go full Billy Carson, Neil.
Nice.
That's a good reference. Neil smoked mad ganja before this.
I wish.
Were you toking a little bit of the devil's lettuce, Neil?
No.
Okay. $20 is when it comes in. Sam Shimon would eat GI alive. Not that Jay Dyer hasn't been dog walking him already, but man, he wouldn't get away with any perverting of the scripture.
I would do it.
Well, Sam Shamoon's crazy. He might actually literally eat him alive. So
glory to the triune God. I want to show the entire audience something I can do that Sam Shimon can't. I just there you go. I can do that. Sam Shimon can't. So this one comes in from Caleb, who says, in Gnostic non-formant, very clever, very clever, Caleb. You're a very clever guy. You really got us with that one. Josie says GI is drifting the debate into reliability of scriptures off topic. From metaphysical debate to this, just mumbling and spatting. He shouldn't be doing this. Major red herring. Be better, GI. I do think that the debate went off the rails a little bit here and there, but we managed to get a lot of it back on track. So, Jay, the worst. 3 and 1's too complex for Neil, but 12 logos in the Nomad's perfectly acceptable.
Nice.
Okay. Jeremiah says Gnostics frequent retreat back to it's one book when he knows dang well what Jay is saying. It's just one example of his many sophistries. By the way, right now we have a full, we're totally full in the call queue. There's tons of people still trying to join the studio. I'm sorry, guys. As we start filtering through callers, you'll be able to get in.
Are you getting my super chats to read, or are they just going on my end? I think
that's just you, bro.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not out. Yeah, I'm just wondering.
Yeah. This one comes in Talesian's map, certifiably debunking the Yehudish origins from Moses to now Joseph. It's all stolen mythology. Dyer is a dweeb, he says, Jay. He called you a dweeb.
Nice.
I guess it's time to pack it up.
I don't even think he has a mustache, though. Fuck that guy. This one comes in from Davis Wood, who says, question for Neil. Is a block of iron one thing if it can be divided into individual atoms? Atoms themselves are fundamentally separate things, not just parts.
Question for me? Sorry. I was typing in my...
Pay attention, Neil.
Block of iron thing is if it divided into atoms themselves are fundamentally separate, not just parts. I mean... The as I said, the modern Platonist view on atoms is that we actually accept that atoms are like describing the fundamentals of reality, but they actually attest to Plato, not Democritus, because when you smash atoms together, they don't break up and fall into smaller atoms. They actually show a mathematical symmetry. So that's the modern perspective on that.
Math degree here. One is not many. Worst debate ever. Okay. Zach Mercer, I noticed that you didn't have a beard, though.
I didn't actually argue, by the way, one is many. I said that the numeral 3 is both one and many. Obviously, the number 1 is not many, although it is divisible into many. You can go into fractions. So
I have to add this. The Pando Aspen Grove in Utah is roughly 47,000 aspen trees, but one thing that is amazing about them, they have a single root system, a singular living organism. Imagine that, one root, thousands of trees. Peanut says, evidence of Moses and the Exodus do exist in Egypt when the hieroglyphics are deciphered correctly using Welsh language and syntax, as shown by Wilson and Blackard in their book Moses and the Hieroglyphs.
Talk about Exodus?
Yes.
Welsh language and syntax? Well, I don't know what they're talking about.
I have no idea. That's above my pay grade. Jay the worst. I predict Neil did the magic fungi and misunderstood the trip. You can make fun of these guys because they sound beardless, Neil. That's perfectly acceptable. Bird Brain for 10 says the Trinity is not complicated. God is the sun is the light of the sun, and the Spirit is the warmth you feel from the sun. At least that's how I understand it. Thanks for the content.
That's the son of righteousness idea. We believe that too, about the nous being being represented by the sun, being the all-pervading form, all-pervading source of logic and reason, perfection.
I don't think he's actually making a literal reference to the sun, but rather saying that this
Yeah.
one thing has three different things you can do, right? Is
Right.
that okay?
Yeah.
So T. Cavallo says for $5, thanks for curing me of my Thorazine addiction. This was a burden to watch. Whale Jennings says, I wasn't religious when I was 8 years old. I got real sick. My whole family and school came to visit me. When the disease moved my head, it was game over. But that night, an angel appeared before me and saved me. Yeah, Neil.
Well,
what do you think about that, Neil?
no, look, if that happened to me, I don't blame you. That's like that happened to you. You got to follow it. I'm like, whatever.
I haven't seen any angels either, but whatever. Slavic polytheist for 5 Canadian says, Jay said one can be many things. I agree. He just used the Trinity to prove pagan monism. The one can emanate many gods and other forms and beings.
Interesting. Yeah. So, I mean, I would just say, okay, how do we know that? How do we know that's true versus Neil's conception of the same monadology?
James says for Gnostic, do you have a soul? Are you your soul? Your body? Both? Are you one? Are you many? Are you one and many? The essence of God is a num.
Yeah, in this world, my worldview, I believe there's a soul and a body.
So you're
GI,
Yeah.
GI, the evidence shows Jews actually worship multiple gods and did not obey the Torah. A single tear runs down the prophet Jeremiah's face as he says, I know. This one
That's actually the strongest argument against what I'm saying. Is when you go to the prophets and talk about how bad the Jews were and how polytheistic and idolatry they were. That's the best argument I've heard against my stuff that I put out there.
The unplugged beta says for 10, I'm not ready.
You understand what I'm saying though, Jay, about that? Because what my arguments are, like, when we look at the evidence of the Jews before this period, they're all worshiping many gods, they're worshiping Asherah, Yahweh, they're doing all this other stuff, they're making graven images. And the person actually made a fair critique and says, that's what Jeremiah is telling us. He's literally saying that's what's happening in his time period.
Well, then that would mean that the texts do relate historical accuracies, which would refute your argument that they are late.
It's a good argument, but it also we still don't have evidence for the contrary either.
Well,
so it's not so you like in Jerusalem or like in the temples of Yahweh.
The prophets talk about the high priest in Jerusalem engaging these activities, like in Ezekiel.
Yeah, it looks like to me that later scribes were accounting for the history of Jerusalem being.
But you just said that the prophets are describing polytheism early on.
That's what the texts say. I think the texts are written later. That's what I'm saying.
Because hang on, guys,
the texts are reliable there.
Let's finish barreling through the super chats, boys.
All right.
I'm not ready, but I'd like to debate at some point. Well, good for you. I guess get ready.
Wikipedia, yeah, right.
GI is your source. Wikipedia, Urban Dictionary, or both. He's making a Crucible reference to a guy who was debating once who told me that the definition of hypocrisy from the Urban Dictionary. It was pretty funny. Bruce Loden is an independent researcher, and there's no scholar called Thomas L. Davies, Gnostic informant.
Philip R. Davies, Thomas L. Thomas. I said you heard me wrong. Philip R. Davies, Thomas L. Thomas, and Bruce Loudon is a PhD, not just some random independent scholar. He was a professor.
Do you trust anybody with a redundant name?
Thomas L. Thomas.
Yeah, that's. I mean,
he's still
you trust anybody with a redundant name?
He's an Irish scholar.
Then you can't trust him double.
Oh,
red flags.
I thought you were going to like him because he's Irish.
Are you kidding me? I'm a self-loathing Irishman. I'm English and Irish. And my friend Posh says that means I wear the traditional headwear of the Irish, which is the English boot. Technician says, notice how Gnostic lover...
Thomas L. Thompson. I said his name wrong.
Oh, okay. Notice how Gnostic lover profiles don't have PFP, typical bot behavior. At least say something with substance, dipshits. This one is from the Unplugged Beta. It says, this is for the grift. I appreciate it as the grifter extraordinaire. I appreciate all the super chats. Roger Rabbit says, for $100, a perfect God would know all that is required to have on earth at 7,000 years old. He would have created everything to make it so. You both rely too much on teachings and less on any type of faith.
I don't even know what that means.
It's a lot of money, though.
Yeah, it's a nice super chat.
Respect that.
The Lost Neil fallacy, says Josie Gaming. Eric says AB and AB are three different things. The paper, the writing represents the number, and the number itself. You're the dumb one, but that's a whole different formula. Okay. This one comes in from Pepper Prophet. Good work, Jay. This one says from the San Joe Savage, GI simply using something does not provide justification for that something, i.e. using consensus of scientists is not justification for the consensus nor their mythology. Or I'm sorry, methodology.
Interesting.
Okay, guys, I got to wrap the super chats there. I'm sorry, they're coming in. I wish I could get to all of them, but we got to jump over to the callers. I'm just going to take them in the order that I saw you guys pop in. Scrumpage Tutor, you're up first. How are you this fine evening? I'm going to try to time this, so make your questions very pointed towards the debater so that they can answer them. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. So before you guys moved on in the middle of the debate, there was a mention of a holistic approach to acknowledging scholarly reference insofar as whether or not you're actually going to give credence to a certain set of arguments from a scholar. Neil, could you go ahead and reconcile this for me? Jay necessarily mentioned that later or after you had said that a minority of scholars could necessarily be right. Are you arguing that the same in your, in your refutation? Are you arguing the same thing that Jay is necessarily saying when you say that a minority of scholars could necessarily be right, i.e., the idea of Neoplatonism not being existent in your reference?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you. Have a good one, caller. Please drop out on the back end so other people can come in. I'd appreciate that very much. And you have a wonderful evening. Teriak, can you hear me okay?
Yep, perfect. First of all, amazing show, guys. To everybody, I just have a real quick question for Neil. Neil, you've done a multiple different podcasts with Jason Georgiani, and he basically makes the case that Christianity is just like the brainchild of Plato.
Yeah.
So if that is the case, why would you not just support Orthodox Christianity rather than Neoplatonism?
Well, it's not identical to it, so it's different from it. So you can't just be like, oh, it's because it's adopting Platonist tenets that it. And obviously, I believe in my worldview that it bastardizes things like the nous and the logos and stuff like that. And so, yeah, that's the reason why.
But like, if you look at it from, if it was like Aristotle and the likes that continued on Plato's vision, why do you not trust that vision rather than something new? It's like,
well, the Platonists continued on. They didn't all become Christians. There was Platonists all the way to late antiquity, all the way through the Dark Ages, all the way to Platon, if you want to call them that, all the way till today. So it's not like they all just became Christians, even though it is true that some Platonists did convert. I think Origen was one of them. I think Justin Martyr.
Very quick. Last question, Terry App. Got a lot of callers.
Yeah, no, I can go there. Appreciate you having me on, and shout out to everybody. Jay, Neil, and Andrew, thanks for putting on the show.
Of course, thank you. Have a wonderful evening. Corinth, very quickly.
Yeah, just a question for Jay. In the analogy used for the Trinity using the written out the number 3, you were trying to use this to show that the Trinity can be one and many in this sense. This was relative to the critique of Gnostic Informant. So if we're saying it like 3 is in the numerical sense, it's 3, and in the amount of figures being put forward, they're 1. Do you think that this is analogous to the Trinity, insofar as you think in some senses Christ is God, but in other senses Christ isn't God?
No, it's not about Christ. It's a question of just that even objects in the world, even mundane created objects, have both multiplicity and unity that are traits.
In different senses, right?
So the relationship of one and many in the triad is obviously not the same, but it's just an analogy that if it exists in the created order, there's no reason why it couldn't exist in God.
In the Creator, we see it exists in different senses. So if we look at something in one sense,
it's
it might have
analogy.
this. In another sense, it's different senses.
That's why
But in
it's
the
an
Trinity,
analogy.
we're not doing that, right? We're not
That's
looking
why
at different
it's an
senses.
analogy.
But it's not an analogy because the thing that we're looking at there is disanalogous. They are identical, Christ and God. The one and the three are identical, not just different invocations.
No, they're
of
not. The nature and person in the Trinity are distinct. They're not identical.
So you don't think Christ is identical to God?
He possesses the divine nature, but all
So
Trinitarian
Christ is
theology,
God, right?
all Trinitarian theology hinges on the nature-person distinction.
So Christ is not God, or Christ is God?
Christ has a divine nature, but he's God the Son.
So Christ is God, or Christ is not God?
Christ has the divine nature, which is shared amongst three persons.
So Christ is God, or Christ is not God?
Again, you're equivocating on the word God, which I already explained to Gnostic Informant.
I'm not.
Hang on,
You are
Corinth. Last
equivocating.
question. Make it good.
Okay. I know this is going to be a new question, but Christ is God, or Christ is not God?
No,
Christ is God the Son.
Get out of here, Corinth. Thank you for the question. I appreciate it. Please drop out on the back end. I appreciate that very much so that other callers can get in. Bishop, how are you? Can you hear me
What's
okay?
up, Bishop? Good to see you, Bishop.
What's up? What's up, Neil?
You're kind of
to see you, man.
you're a
Good
little
to see you.
you're a little bit choppy. So please dive
Can you
right
hear
into
me?
your question. We can hear you. Yeah,
Yeah, I
go
can hear
ahead.
you. Good to see you, man.
Right on, man. Neil, you did a great job. I just had to say you did a great job.
Thank you.
And I had a question for Jay. Why would you want to believe or worship a god who dashes babies against rocks and orders the slaughter of many people? Why would you consider him a good god?
Well, God has the power of life and death, and in the ancient world, he gave that command to the Israelites to get rid of any of the opponents who would conceivably be future problems for the Israelites. So God knows all things, and if he decides that certain people should be gotten rid of because they're opposing the people that would produce the Messiah, then it's within God's rights to get rid of people, because as scripture says, he has the power of life and death. He can make that decision because he's God. But even if, let's say, Neoplatonism is true, I mean, that's infants being dashed against rocks is just another manifestation of the one.
Well, also, why would God send himself to kill himself and then beg himself not to kill himself?
Yeah, well, that's not what happened. The atonement is a deifying of the human nature. It's not a paying off.
Not
or
in Gethsemane, that did not happen.
I'm explaining the Orthodox view of atonement, which is
Yeah,
not,
caller, you got to let him answer. You got to let Jay answer the question you asked. Go ahead, Jay.
not the Protestant view that God is punishing himself. It's that God the Son willingly took on death to destroy the power of death, which is a demonic power. It's the power of Satan. And so he's deifying our nature. He's not paying the Father off with some sort of created thing, because God doesn't need anything. So he's not being paid off.
Last follow-up, caller.
But you guys did mention that God incited David to create a census, but also Satan incited David to create a census. Wouldn't that be the same character? You said that was Satan.
No, it's
You got a
just,
Marcionite in the house.
it's primary and secondary causation, right? So if I know that a bank is going to be robbed, and I overhear them that they're going to rob a bank, and then they go and rob the bank, like, the fact that I know a thing's happening or I let a thing happen doesn't make me the immediate cause of it. It makes me a proximate cause or a secondary cause.
I'm sorry, I got to leave it there, caller. Thank you so much for calling in. I hope you have a wonderful evening. If you don't mind, drop out back in the back. We still got a ton of callers coming in. I'm sorry that these are very brief, but I want to try to get to as many people as we can. Not your dude, go ahead.
Hey guys, thanks for having me on. I enjoyed the civility of the debate, and I'll chalk that up to Father Turbo keeping Jay honest. But Neil, I'd like you to interact with the Orthodox typological view that Jay would present of Old Testament sacrifices and the final atonement by Christ, because you offered a common critique of penal substitution that even Orthodox apologists will use against Protestants. But I think you would find the Orthodox view on these things to be at least a little more robust. It would allow you to be a little more, perhaps not necessarily good faith, because I don't want to accuse you of straw man if you don't know the view, But yeah, could you interact with the view of the atonement and Old Testament sacrifices that Orthodoxy would propose?
Are you saying I'm missing something that's different from other Christianities that Orthodoxy?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
The view of
Explain.
the atonement is completely different. I'll give the short of it, and
you have
perhaps
to be very, very quick, caller.
that's fine. I'll give the short of it. Perhaps Jay can dive into it a little bit more. But like Jay said, it's about lifting up human nature from fallenness. It's about raising humankind to be what they were designed to be, like originally in the garden. Like lowercase g gods. So it's not necessarily about like a payment, like Jay was just saying with the last caller, but it's more about lifting up human nature to be where it belongs through theosis.
That's interesting. I'll look into it more. By the way, I don't hate Orthodoxy. I attended Pascha in Greece this year.
Attended again, man. It's awesome.
That's the wax from from Jerusalem. And I have the father that church I went to gave me that icon right there.
Yeah,
very nice.
I would just quick comment. I have a lot
of
of videos that you could look up critiquing penal substitutionary atonement, which Neil was kind of critiquing a kind of a standard Protestant type of view, and we actually make the same argument that Neil makes against Protestants.
Yeah,
Thank you
I'd
so
love
much.
to hear you interact with that in a later video for sure.
Thank you so much, Not Your Dude. Please drop out in the back. I'd appreciate it. I appreciate the question. No, I can vouch for the fact that Gnostic Informant does not hate Orthodox Christians. He's a friend of mine. So we've drank together, and I'm better at that than him too. But but the point is that I like the guy fine. Grunt, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead with your question, please.
This question's for Neil. It's more inquisitive than argumentative. You appealed to multiple authorities and historical understandings of theism tonight. I just want to know, in your perspective, what is the most compelling piece of evidence that you've found to deny the existence of the Christian God?
Piece of evidence that denies the God. So like a evidence that goes against?
Yes. You argued against that tonight. What is the most compelling piece of evidence that you've found to deny the existence of the Christian God?
I brought up Elephantine as a whole because all the sources we have there, all the papyri, all the inscriptions, all the ostraca, there's no attestation to anything that we would be looking for a First Temple period Jews. So that was kind of that is evidence in my opinion that argues against the biblical worldview.
That's the most compelling you found?
Yeah, because I mean, you had a culture who's been there. Well, Solomon around 1000. I'm sorry, David sets up the First Temple period. Solomon finishes the temple right around the 10th century BC period, and they're there all the way to the 6th century BC. So 400 years we're talking about, and then they moved to Elephantine, or at least 1,000, like a lot of them do, and then you would expect to find something, even if they rejected that whole. Even if they wanted to just go into sin. You would at least find something. There's not even a single mention of the name Joseph or Abraham or Moses or Jacob or anything. Nothing. Just Yahweh.
The authority of the Hebrews is the one that you were appealing to here.
The authority you're talking about?
Yes, you said the writings in Elephantine are the ones that deny the existence of the Christian God. So I'm just clarifying that
I'm talking
appealing
about
to the Hebrew histories.
There's got to be the last question, caller.
Yeah, my point to my reason why this one is because it kind of cuts the whole thing off by its roots. Because if the Old Testament narrative isn't true, then Jesus died for nothing.
Very well.
All right. Thank you so much, caller. Appreciate it. If you don't mind dropping off in the back so that other callers can get in. We've had a full studio this entire time. VG, how you doing?
Hey,
haven't seen you in a long time. Go ahead with your question when you're ready.
Yeah, so I was wondering if any of you realize that you're worshiping a false god and Crom, the god of strength, is the only one and true God.
Are you making a Conan the Barbarian reference? Crom?
Well, Crom is the one and true only God, as he is the god of ultimate strength. The god that you worship, he's a complete fraud. So he requires worship, which a god with ultimate strength and power would not require worship because he doesn't need validation from inferior beings. On top of that, supposedly, according to your faith, Jesus came down to earth as a man, And as a man, he showed weakness. A God of ultimate strength and power would not show weakness. He wouldn't submit to the Romans. He wouldn't cry like a baby when he's getting crucified on the cross. He'd actually enact strength and power. And on top of that, Christians allow for prayer, which is just an act of weakness. I don't know why a God of ultimate strength and power would be interested in spreading weakness. Rather than teaching his followers how to actually enact their own strength, he, the Christian God supposedly just wants you all to be weak and teaches you to, rather than developing your own strength and power, just beg for relief. God, the real true God, Crom, he actually tries to teach his followers the truth of strength. And when you pray to him, he will send you dooms, not aid, so that you may learn strength.
Wasn't Crom bisexual though?
No,
Wasn't he a
I don't know
human
where you got
sacrifice
that.
deity?
He's not into any gay shit.
Are you sure?
Crom was a human sacrifice deity, though, right?
No.
Well, Crom.
Yes, he
No,
was.
that was the
Isn't Crom fictional?
no, he actually is the one and only true God.
Yeah.
Does
So
Krun
man.
account for the laws of logic too?
Mhm.
sorry?
Does Krun account for the the universals like logic?
Well, yes, there is strength of mind. So he is responsible for all strength that exists, both strength of body and mind.
There you go. We should all convert.
So yeah, Jay, how much do you bench?
What does that have to do with this?
Well, again, if your God exists and you pray to him, do you not? Should he not grant you strength?
I'm confused. Is strength putting my butthole on OnlyFans like you do? Is that strength?
Oh,
Or
come
what?
on, come
Oh,
on. Hang
pussy.
on,
Oh.
hang on. Look,
So again,
keep it clean, keep it clean,
so-
keep it clean.
So again, if your God exists and you pray to him, would he not grant you strength? So it doesn't seem like he grants you strength. You're too ashamed to even admit how much you bench.
I just don't understand what it has to do with what's being
Whereas,
debated tonight.
whereas again, well, I'm debating the fact that you are following a false god.
Uh-huh.
And again, Crom commands all men to achieve strength and power, whereas I have achieved strength and power. Best bench I've made so far is 410 pounds. That was back when I was natural. I've actually gotten stronger since I've been on steroids. So I've actually achieved great strength following Crom, whereas you are weak and feeble following Jesus Christ.
I might have a
who
reputation.
again submitted to the Romans and cried, "Why have you forsaken me?"
Hang on.
So
hang on. I think I would say logically that Jay probably benches, and definitely me, benches less than you, right? For sure. I mean, you're huge. You say you bench like 400 pounds, right?
yeah, 410.
But here's
That's
my
the
counter.
best
Jay,
single I've had.
how many bones have you broken exercising?
Oh,
None.
I've broken 0.
Are you sure? I thought you broke some bones. I thought last time.
Well,
we
I
talked,
broke
you
an
said-
elbow riding my mountain bike. That's I guess you can technically call
That's
that
exercising.
That's exercise.
Where was all Crom's strength then?
Well, guess what?
Where was
Guess what
all
I
of
did right
Crom's
after I
strength
broke
then?
my elbow? Guess what I did right after I broke my elbow the same day? I hit a overhead press PR. I didn't know my elbow was broken. And rather than, because I follow the God of Crom, I did not submit to weakness. I worked out anyway, and I hit an overhead
Well, why
press
would
PR
Crom
of
let
225
your-
for sets of 3.
But why would Crom let your elbow break in the first place?
Well, he doesn't give aid. He demands that you learn strength on your own, which
Oh.
I did. Even after breaking my elbow, I was still able to achieve strength because I'm a follower of Crom.
I
So what
understand.
has Jesus given you?
Can I ask a question to you?
Yeah, sure.
So if a Skittles dude overpowers another dude and he becomes like a power top on a power bottom, is Crumb there for that?
You know, it's kind of weird how much you like think about gay sex.
I mean,
But
you're
you worship a long-haired
hippie.
hippie.
This is what you're
So-
into. So I'm trying to figure out, is that where Crumb is giving you strength in that?
Hey, I'm not the one talking about gay shit. You're the one.
I'm
who
asking
is.
you in your I'm being serious. In your worldview, is that where does Crumb give that strength?
What?
Does he?
Being a power top?
Yeah.
Well, look, he tells you to go forth and do as you will, enact your force upon the world.
Okay, so he's there
If
for all that.
I wanted to,
Wow.
hey, if I wanted to teach you the pleasures of the anus, I'll teach
All
you.
right, enough. I'm trying to keep this clean. VG, come on, dude.
That's a fair cancel.
I think
All
can you
right.
say beehole or is that apologize?
It's fine. It's fine. It's not going to hurt nothing. But come on, VG. I let you on, man. Don't do that shit. It was. But anyway, what's up, man?
Oh, what's up? How's it going?
Good.
I have a question for Gnostic Informant, I guess.
Mhm.
It's more so on the fact of you using the 6,000 years as a refutation for the age of the earth, right? Like you're using that as you don't want it basically contradicts how old the actual earth is, right?
Mhm.
So I have a question. What about when it says in the Bible multiple times that God sees time differently and one day for God is thousands of years for
Yeah.
us?
That just moves it back. That 7 days of creation just makes it 7,000. You're not
No. God is outside of time.
Okay, but he's still
Time is not.
But our time
like-
is still our time, right?
But
So
God
whatever's written in
created
the Bible,
things.
right?
So-
So God would have a different time than us, and whatever you're saying.
Yeah, but
Yes.
I guess hang on, caller. Let me make sure I can get
Oh,
this because I want to make sure you got the question correct and we don't waste too much time. Are you
Oh,
saying that there's an allegory here? You're referencing an allegory.
I guess it's more so.
That allegorically 1,000 years means doesn't actually literally mean 1,000 years, or do you think it does?
Yes, allegorically 1,000 years, like because God is outside of time,
Mhm.
would he not be able to, like, would it not basically map onto how we visualize time? Because how we as humans visualize time is completely different from how God visualizes time, because
Yeah.
he is everlasting.
That makes more sense. Yeah.
So him being so.
Real
It
quick, caller.
basically maps
We
on-
got to wrap it here.
Oh, yeah.
Go
No,
ahead.
you're good.
Go ahead. You can finish. You can finish.
Oh
Just
yeah,
wrap it.
it just that mapping on type thing, basically. So if you're looking at time in that way, 1 second is maybe 1,000,000 years to God, or 1 second to God is 1,000,000 years to us, basically.
Yeah, that would account for the empirical data more, I think. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Yorming. Please drop out on the back end. I'd appreciate it. Thank you. Mendoza, you've been waiting patiently. Thank you for doing that. Go ahead with your question when you're ready.
Yeah, the question is for Neil. Neil, is the monad an a metaphysical principle?
Yeah.
Okay. Are metaphysical principles empirically verifiable or
No.
testable?
No.
Okay. So if we're to conform our worldviews with that which most closely reflects the empirical data, but there is no empirical data for the monad, how do you reconcile that irreconcilability between the metaphysical monad and the non-empirically verified, monad here?
Well, it's not necessarily something that I'm even saying you can empirically test for. It's a metaphysical argument that's trying to account for what's going on in our reality.
Okay, but you said that you brought up empiricism as a way of saying my worldview, right, is more
For
coherent
things that we can,
because
things
it
that, like
coheres
history.
with empirical data.
Yeah, you're
But
talking about
the monad
metaphysical.
itself is not in empirical data.
Yeah, you're talking about going back to the monad, some higher, hierarchical hypostasis metaphysics that it's way above where we can even get to. When I'm talking about empiricism, I'm talking about history, archaeology, things that we can actually get at. So
there's no empirical way to get at the monad, right?
It's got to be the last one here, caller.
no, it's more of a priori.
No.
All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Yeah, please drop out on the back end. Have a nice day. Eli, go ahead when you're ready. Oh, Eli, you got to fix it. That was brutal, Eli.
That just hurt my ears, dude.
Hang on. Well, I'm going to give him a second. Eli, stay back there. See if you can't fix that real quick. I'm going to move to another caller and then we'll come back to you. All right. All right. I saw you back there. Blue Stiff, go ahead when you're ready.
Hey, how you doing? This is for Gnostic Informant. You asked about Judges chapter 1, and correctly, Dyer pointed out that God, if you have a lack of faith, he will allow Israel to lose. Were you not aware that in Judges chapter 2, it gives this exact explanation for the reasons of the losses in chapter 1?
Judges chapter 2, what does it say?
Yeah, God literally explains to Israel the reason that they lost was due to a lack of faith. For the losses in chapter 1.
You have the passage?
Sure. Judges chapter 2, verses 1 through 5.
So the angel comes to the Lord, he's visiting, he goes, Judges 1, 2. I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong spot.
Judges chapter 2, 1 through 5.
Judges chapter 2, 1 through 5. Okay.
Yes. Which is chapter 1 is giving the historicity of the battles. Chapter 2 is God explaining the reason that they lost, and it was due to a lack of faith and disobedience.
Well, I'm not seeing that at all. I'm seeing, I made you go out of Egypt. I have brought you onto the land, which I am your fathers. I said, I'll never break my covenant with you. You shall make no league with the inhabitants of this land. You shall throw down their altars. I don't see anything about him saying the reason why you lost that battle is because you lost in that faith. I'm not seeing that.
Read verses 1 through 5. It's right there.
So an angel of the Lord came from Gilgal to Bochim and said, I have made you to go out of Egypt, and I brought you unto the land which I swear unto your.
Look, we can't get caught up in reading all this out.
It's there.
But I do.
1 through 5. And
give me the
Jay can
verse
even
where
look
it
it up
says
too.
because. Give me the verse where it says because you were sinning.
Sure, I can pull it up for you. I'm not trying to take up all the time, though. I'm trying to be respectful. I mean, I can pull it up real quick.
I'm looking at 1 through 5 right now.
I can have Jay pull it up as.
I mean, I've got it right here. It's because you did not obey my voice. That's why you're losing.
What verse is that?
Verse 2. You did not obey my voice.
Brought you out of the land, and I swore unto your fathers. I'm reading it right now. I'm not seeing that.
Dude, are you being serious?
Judges 2, verses 1 through 5.
But you have not obeyed my voice. Verse 2.
Verse 2. Well, I'm looking at King James Version. It says, an angel of the Lord came up from Gilgal to Bochim, and I said, I made you go out of Egypt and brought you into the land which I swore unto your fathers, and I said I'd never break a covenant with you.
Verse 2.
Bro, what are we doing here, bro?
And you shall make no league with the inhabitants of this land. You shall throw down their altars, and you have not obeyed my voice. But you have not obeyed my voice. But why have you done this? Okay. It almost sounds like something different is going on, though, but whatever.
All right. Thank you so much, Blue Sif. I'm sorry to cut you off there. Please drop out on the back end. Eli. Oh, Eli, I'm sorry, bro. Your mic is jacked. You're going to have to drop out on the back end. Sorry, I did try to come back to you, but man, it literally sounds like you got an air compressor and you're like, it's just spraying air. Johnny, how are you? Go ahead when you're ready.
Yes, sir. Doing pretty good tonight. My question was mainly to Gnostic, but if any of you want to answer, feel free to. My question was one of 3 parts. If you were to witness a miracle or miracles, how would you describe the miracle to the viewership here tonight? Would you feel you represented what you've seen as the truth? And how accurate do you think it would be interpreted by your followers or us tonight?
Obviously, it depends on what the miracle is. Like, why am I going to assume that this miracle has to do with any particular Islam or Christianity? It depends on what the miracle is, obviously.
Well, I'm just asking you to sell it to me. If you've witnessed something that I wouldn't be able to bear or witness myself, but you're trying to convince me to follow that or that's the truth.
I don't honestly. I might not tell anyone. I might think, I don't know. It depends on what it is, actually.
Gnostic, you'd keep it to yourself.
I've had experiences back in my younger days where I had these, the DMT and all that stuff. I don't tell people about it. It's just crazy shit that I've.
Why does that not surprise me, Neil? I'm just not shocked.
I was a bad dude when I was in my late teens, early 20s.
We were all bad dudes in our
teens. It was pretty bad.
And I'm not pressing, Gnostic. I apologize but your basic skills are very nice. It's been witnessed all night tonight. So,
but no, the reason why I say that is because, no, that's fair. It's a fair question. It's something I'll think about. But the reason why I say that is because I know how people are. They might just not believe. Like they might just be like, "Dude, you just had a hallucination or something." So it depends.
Well, wouldn't you want to? I mean, just trying to make sure, like, if you were to spread that message, you want it to be as coherent, as clear as possible, and to the truth, right? So.
Yeah.
I'll pass that, Jay. Do you think you could have an answer for that? If you
No,
witness a miracle?
typically we shy away from that kind of stuff in the Orthodox world. We don't
Oh,
run with miracle stuff. I mean, there are miracles. I'm just saying, like we don't run with that. Like you would speak to your spiritual father about that kind of stuff.
okay. Yeah, and I was just any miracle in general. I'm not saying you'd have to witness Jesus walking on water or anything like that. I just was curious what your guys' arguments and talents would be.
Neil, don't you have
Just getting into
children?
Mm-mm.
No? Okay. I consider that a miracle.
Is that a miracle? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a miracle. All right. Johnny, thank you so much. You have a wonderful evening. That's it for the callers, guys. We managed to keep this debate within 3 hours. That's fucking amazing.
Oh, wow. That was great.
That's amazing. That's the perfect amount for YouTube. Before both of you get out of here, though, neither one of you are going to leave without once again dropping where everybody can find you and your final thoughts on the debate. We'll start with you, Gnostic. Go ahead.
Well, real quick, I'm reading this Judges 2, 1-5 now, and that is a fair point. It does say, you have not obeyed my voice. Why have you not done this? Now, and I'm not just trying to be like rejecting it flat out. That is fair. It was a good point. I didn't see that at first. And I did take that other verse out of context in a sense. However, it just still is a little confusing on why he would say, my spirit is with you, but then we're going to fail because they have iron chariots. And then later on it says, you didn't obey me. It's just a little confusing, but fair. I'll say point taken. Oh, that's fine.
You want to tell everybody where they can fucking find you, Neil?
Yeah, no, I just want to put that out there so people don't think I'm biased.
All right, where can
Gnostic
they find you?
Informant on YouTube. Check me out, and let's do more of these. I like these.
Yeah. As time permits, when I get special requests from friends, I'm happy to host the debate. I know it gives people a lot of exposure, and people they enjoy me hosting debates from time to time. So, Jay Dyer, go ahead when you're ready.
You can find me on YouTube. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me on Instagram. All the same outlets under my name. Website's jaysanalysis.com. You can get my books there in the shop. Subscribe to my archives and get the last 10 years of content. And then you can find me on the 4th hour of the Alex Jones Show most Fridays and writing for the Sam Hyde Show.
Well, thank you guys so much. And I hope both of you
have
a wonderful evening. Take good care of yourselves. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got a bunch of stuff going on. I'm going back out to whatever for a debate series. End of the month, we got something pretty amazing happening. I just like to mess my hair up because it really pisses off bald atheists, and also it pisses off Sam Shimon. It just, I don't know. I just like to do it. I like to do it. From all of us here at the Crucible to all of you out there in Crucible land, I hope you all have a wonderful night.